A massive earthquake last week off the country's South Island. The magnitude 7.8 quake centered in the ocean near Resolution Island twisted South Island out of shape and moved its southern tip 12 inches closer to Australia. Geologist Jim Birkeland on the line with us now. Jim, this is an incredible story, isn't it?
It sure is, and I especially feel associated with it because my wife and I were in New Zealand in December.
How big? I mean, we're talking about a 7.8, but how big does a quake have to take to move a landmass 12 inches?
Well, it often happened to a much greater extent. In the Alaskan quake in 1964, it moved up and down 47 feet. And in the 1906 quake in San Francisco, the San Andreas moved 21 feet
oh my
sideways.
Gosh.
So you do get immense movements, but this is unusual in that it was in the fairly quiet part of New Zealand on the Atlantic side, on the Indian Ocean side, and the Sea of Tasman, actually, before Australia. But this is amazing, and I was looking in the records here that this is the biggest quake since 1931, and when the big one happened in Napier, 7.8 quake, and that was on the day of the full moon.
Yeah, here we go
again.
Yeah, that's true.
And so the two events were only 22 hours apart, and it was close to an eclipse time, but it wasn't. This one, I actually opened up my window for all of my subscribers on July 19th, and the actual quake was on the 15th. And by my rules, I was a day off.
Jim, some people here on the West Coast are afraid that California will simply break off and fall into the Pacific Ocean. Is this possible?
Absolutely impossible.
Good. You promise.
Yeah. And when people from the East Coast, they talk about California going to break off, and I say, well, if you've seen all those wind farms here in California,
yeah.
Well, they're just going to turn on all those propellers and pull us right back. So we don't worry about that.
We shall see. Jim Birkeland's website, syzygyjob.com. I've got to spell it for you. SYZYGYJOB.com. Jim, again, thank you. General Motors posted a 22% global sales drop from a year earlier for the first 6 months of 2009 amid the economic slowdown and the automaker's slide into bankruptcy. GM said its global first-half sales, which include brands the automaker is trimming from its lineup already, fell 21.8% to 3.55 million vehicles. The automaker's sales in the second quarter fell 15.4% to a little less than 2 million vehicles. President Barack Obama said a broad health care overhaul was critical to U.S. economic recovery and has urged Congress to take advantage of momentum behind the reform package, despite doubts about the plan even among fellow Democrats. In a televised evening news conference, President Obama said the biggest driving force behind the federal deficit was skyrocketing health care costs for the government's Medicare program of health care for the elderly and Medicaid for the poor. Well, I don't agree with that. I think the biggest driving force behind the federal deficit is greed and corruption that seems to be going everywhere. The amount of money they spend for things. They spent millions of dollars, for example, for ham for the needy, which is important, but they pay twice as much for it than what you can get going to your own supermarket. The poor economy is taking a toll even on the dead, with an increasing number of bodies in Los Angeles County going unclaimed by families who just can't afford to bury or cremate their loved ones. At the county coroner's office, which handles homicides and other suspicious deaths, 36% more cremations were done at taxpayers' expense in the last fiscal year over the previous year. The county morgue, which is responsible for the indigent and others who go unclaimed, saw a 25% increase in cremations in the first half of this year over the same period a year ago. These demands on the county crematorium have been so high that earlier this year, officials there stopped accepting bodies from the coroner, just stopped. The coroner's office since has contracted with two private firms for about $135,000 to handle the overflow. European Union countries have failed to authorize the sale of Monsanto's genetically modified corn. The European Commission said an expert panel did not reach an agreement to approve the corn, and now the debate will head to a higher level with ambassadors and ministers. Federal health officials say they have found cancer-causing ingredients in electronic cigarettes, despite manufacturers' claims the products are safer than tobacco cigarettes. The FDA said testing of products from 2 leading electronic cigarette makers turned up several toxic chemicals, including a key ingredient in antifreeze. The FDA scientists said they tested 19 varieties of cigarettes, many of which contained fruit and candy flavors. Electronic cigarettes produce a nicotine-type mist absorbed directly into the lungs. Most can easily pass as a tobacco cigarette with slim white bodies and glowing amber tips. They even emit what looks like puffs of white smoke. Manufacturers have touted the products as a healthier alternative to smoking because no burning is involved and there's no hazardous cocktail of cancer-causing chemicals. Regulators said they already halted 50 shipments of electronic cigarettes at the border, but those actions have been challenged in federal court by the manufacturers. Those products are made primarily in China. Word to the wise, just check the ingredients with anything you buy. The Senate has rejected letting people carry hidden guns in 48 states if they have a concealed weapon permit in any one of them. It's a victory for gun control advocates in a Democratic-controlled Congress that has been friendly to the gun lobby. A strong majority of the Senate, in a 58-39 vote, supported the measure, which would require most states to honor the concealed weapons permits issued by other states. But the tally has 2 votes short of the 60 votes that were needed to add the measure as an amendment to a defense bill. So it doesn't look like it's going to happen. The Drug Enforcement Agency's raid of Michael Jackson's personal physician's Houston office has focused on powerful drugs. A lawyer for Jackson's doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray, says police were searching the clinic for evidence of manslaughter. Phoenix police made a startling discovery. When they pulled a motorist over for reckless driving, they found a toddler boy there wearing a diaper full of methamphetamines. Man, can you believe that? Newly analyzed remains suggest that a modern human killed a Neanderthal man in what is now Iraq between 50 and 75,000 years ago. The finding is scant but tantalizing evidence for a theory that modern humans may have helped kill off the Neanderthals. The weapon, a thrown spear. Michael Cremo, author of Human Devolution and Forbidden Archaeology, on the line with us. Now, how remarkable is this discovery, Michael?
It's pretty interesting. Nothing like a murder or cannibalism to draw attention to an archaeological discovery.
True.
That's for sure. Let's look at the evidence that they really have here. It's not a new discovery that they're talking about. They're talking about some archaeologists who re-examined some Neanderthal rib bones that were originally discovered in the 1950s in the Zagros Mountains area of northern Iraq. So they saw what appeared to be some kind of wounds on these rib bones, and they determined they must have been made by some kind of projectile weapon, a thrown spear with a stone tip, for example. And how do they get the idea that it was a modern human being and not another Neanderthal
True.
who threw it? Well, it's because of a theory that they have. This Neanderthal individual lived about 50,000 years ago. They believe that humans like us, capable of making these throwing spears, first came into existence about 100,000 years ago. So this is the reason why they say they believe it was a modern type human that killed this Neanderthal ape man, because they believe the Neanderthals did not have the intelligence to make these throwing spear kinds of weapons. Only humans like us
What does this do, Michael, to the theory of evolution, as so many scientists have always thought there was that evolution from chimpanzees to apes to Cro-Magnon to Neanderthals to humans?
Well, here's what it does. I'll give you an example. It throws a whole monkey wrench into the whole
literally
that they've gotten. Here's an example of what it does. Let's take them at their word that only humans like us are capable of making these kinds of throwing spears.
Okay.
In 1997, some German archaeologists found throwing spears shaped like modern Olympic javelins, obviously weapons meant for throwing, for killing animals or perhaps other human beings. These were found in layers of rock over 430,000 years old. So that means if they want to say only human beings like us were capable of making things like that, that means they have to say humans like us were existing over 400,000 years ago. Of course, they didn't want to do that.
Right.
So in that case, they said, it must have been an ape man who made, the throwing spears over 400,000 years ago. So, see, this is the kind of trouble that they get into.
They get trapped, don't they?
They get trapped by their own theories, because that would mean, well, if you want to say an ape man made those spears that were found 400,000 years ago, why couldn't it have been another Neanderthal or ape man who made and used the spear that was used to kill this Neanderthal dead, wounded person that they found in Iraq?
Michael Cremo's theories, of course, go way back. If you have heard him on Coast to Coast, where he believes humankind existed millions and millions of years ago. Compelling, and it's time to get him back for a full program. His website, mcremo, CREMO.com. You can get all these news guests. Their websites will be on our Twitter feed, twitter.com/Coast to Coast AM, and you can get their websites there. Gidget the Chihuahua, the bug-eyed, big-eared star of the 1990s Taco Bell commercials, who was a diva on and off the screen, has died. She was 15.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
Gidget suffered a massive stroke, laid at her trainer's home in Santa Clarita, California, and had to be euthanized. Though Gidget was a female dog, they had her look like a male dog in the commercials. British men find the prospect of asking a woman to marry them almost as scary as swimming with sharks. According to a new survey, 4 out of 5 men were so petrified of proposing that they preferred to forego tradition and wait for their girlfriends to propose to them. Of those polled, 28% ranked swimming with sharks as the scariest thing to do, closely followed by 23% who considered proposing marriage the most frightening. And a detailed, functional, artificial human brain can be built within the next 10 years, according to a leading scientist. Henry Markram, director of the Blue Brain Project, has already simulated elements of a rat brain. He told the TED Global Conference in England that a synthetic human brain would be of particular use finding treatments for mental illnesses. In a moment, fuzzy logic, heaven in a chip, noise. Bart Costco joins us as we talk about the creation of an artificial human brain. That's next on Coast to Coast AM.
This hour of Coast to Coast AM is brought to you by DarkMatterDVDs.com. Get your free DVD now at DarkMatterDVDs.com.
Hey, investors, does the bailout plan sound more like a new hedge fund? Borrow money to invest? But should we invest in this? Let's ask Kevin DeMerit of Lear Capital.
George, we already are. The government's borrowing money from the same people it's bailing out, us. Whether it works or not, we still have to pay it back.
Can it work?
Well, to me, the bailout feels like when somebody finds spare change in their couch when there's no money in the bank. It feels good for the moment, then you run out of cushions.
So what choices do investors have?
Well, I think if the bailout works or not, inflation and higher interest rates are going to follow. It's one reason a report out by J.P. Morgan says gold could rise 30% in 12 months. Gold's easy to buy, easy to sell, and it's never been worth zero.
To learn more, call Lear Capital, the exclusive gold company of Coast to Coast AM, at 1-800-474-4259 for your free gold investor kit. You'll also get Lear's latest special report, Gold in the Markets Ahead. Call now, 1-800-474-4259. That's 1-800-474-4259.
Men, are you thinking about the health of your prostate? Recently, New Vitality Health Products gave away 500 free bottles of the supplement Beta Prostate to listeners of this station. Due to incredible demand, they're giving away more free bottles of Beta Prostate to any new customers who call now. Beta Prostate is packed with plant sterols that support your prostate health. Remember, your prostate affects urine flow, sleeping habits, intimacy, and overall quality of life. Beta Prostate is so powerful, you'd have to take 100 saw palmetto capsules in order to get the same natural plant sterols as one Beta Prostate. And if you haven't tried Beta Prostate yet, you can call right now for a free bottle. You only pay shipping and handling. Call 1-800-416-1671. This offer is limited to one free bottle per household. Give your body nutrition that targets the prostate. Call now and try Beta Prostate for free. Call 1-800-416-1671. That's 1-800-416-1671. 1-800-416-1671.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory. It's Nano Time with Bart Costco this hour. Dr. Bart Costco, professor of electrical engineering, noise, heaven and a chip. He's written a book on fuzzy thinking, nanotime as well. Here he is. Bart, how are you? Welcome back.
Good to be back, George. How are you?
Okay, this is an incredible story. Artificial human brain, they believe, can be built within the next 10 years. Now, what do they mean by this, though? What is the artificial human brain?
Well, right now, it's just one column in your neocortex. And these are stacked neurons in the brain. Humans have about 1 million, maybe 2 million of these columns. And if you put 10,000 processors together, each representing a single neuron, you get what Dr. Markham claims is a pretty good approximation of one column, which may have a lot of good purposes in terms of testing out medicines. It's a pretty far cry, though, George, from the whole brain. And my concern with the 10-year argument, which is based on Moore's law, which says that computer chip density doubles about every 2 years, and it seems to be holding up, and I think will hold up for at least 10 years, is that in 10 years you only have doubled 5 times. 2 to the 5 is 32, so that cuts it down by 32. But in 20 years, for example, which I think is more realistic.
I see. Okay, good point.
2 to the 10 rather, is doubled 10 times. So that's 1,000 times. And so the kind of computer, as Dr. Markham says, that you would need today, and he's using great big IBM supercomputers called Blue Gene computers, would take the model human brain would take several football fields. And the annual cost of that in the power, the megawatts, would be at least $3 billion. But if you keep chopping that down, not 10 years, but 20, and for example, in 40 years, if that were the case, if the doubling continues, then you divide that by a whole million. And I think long before that, we'll have this rough computational power. And that's, again, a far cry from having an actual human brain. But it's very interesting in terms of what's called computational neuroscience, because no one's ever really done this before, with this many processors and this kind of fast computing power.
You know, Bart, if I had to stop and start my brain as much as I have to do my computer, I'd go nuts. What would they use an artificial human brain for?
One example is pharmaceutical testing. Other examples would be the effects of stroke. For example, if you start removing neurons, which happens pretty much after birth, and removing synapses as well. For example, if you take a shot of whiskey, that kills off a fair number of those. What effect does that have on the whole? How many synapses do you have to take out before functionality, the ability to do arithmetic, for example, falls? There's a lot of pattern recognition that my colleagues and I have found in neural networks that will go on just fine, fuzzy kind of computation, if you pull out half of the wires. But you have to pull them out at random. And you can't just knock out a big hole in the middle. And those kinds of tests, I think, it's valuable for.
Would you say that their work in trying to develop an artificial human brain is like Nobel Prize in science type work?
If they pull it off, George, if they pull it off, and they have the right crew of people, this is a big team in Switzerland. coupled with IBM. It's really a big European project. Very smart people, well-credentialed. It's very real science. And it's the oldest idea around. Let's try to model an individual neuron. The brain has at least 100 billion of those, maybe a trillion of those, roughly the number of stars in our Milky Way galaxy, and dedicate a lot of computational power to each one. Those are still software models, but they're pretty good models now. And each one has about 10,000 connections to other neurons. So in the past, we just couldn't do that. When I helped develop the first neural conference with the IEEE in 1987, we could only model maybe 10 to 100 neurons, and beyond that, everything started breaking down, trying to capture in a chip. So the idea that you could take the best parallel computers of today, turn them loose on the raw models that we have, and see what happens, see if it scales up, is pretty impressive. And to the first order, they have some basic pattern recognition results. They don't have a brain yet. It's not talking. It's not how the computer. But in theory, if Moore's law holds up, and if the power grid holds up and all those kinds of things, they may have a very impressive computational unit in 10, 20, or 30 years.
What's new with Bart Kosko?
Always publishing papers, George. For example, I have a new paper coming out with a colleague on noise and neurons. We were intrigued to see to what extent the neurons in your brain use the noise from the other neurons in your brain. Again, if there's 100 billion neurons talking and chattering away, that's a lot of noise. And it's interesting to see that brains almost certainly would work that way, that properties simply don't hold for individual neurons. They only hold for collective networks of neurons in terms of the noise ability for that. So that kind of research. What I think we could do here, and I've written about in Heaven and Chip and elsewhere, is something like a brain comb. It's often been called in science fiction, but now with modern nanotubes, not carbon tubes, but inorganic tubes, the ability to comb your brain in some way to get an estimate, like a fingerprint, a kind of brain print, first for backup purposes, and then for other purposes, to directly manipulate the brain, record your memories, and enhance it.
Bart, let's talk about chips when we come right back, plus we'll open up the phone lines. Our guest this hour, Dr. Bart Kosko on Coast to Coast AM.
Get daily show updates right to your inbox for free with the new Coast Zone newsletter. Sign up today at coasttocoastam.com.
Are calling me home. 'Twas so good to be young then, in the season of plenty, when the catfish were jumping as high.
1110 KFAB.
A time just for planting. A time.
We're out to be #1 in the USA. That's the reason people say Rusty Export. Hey, you can't do better than that.
The Cash for Conquer program will end very quickly. There's only a limited amount of funds available. Your Rusty Egg Ford team is on top of this 100% to ensure that if you act fast, you'll get everything you're entitled to, and that means the best buy of your life.
Our best selection, our lowest prices too. That's the reason people choose Rusty Egg Ford. Yeah, you can't do better than that.
Over 20 models available. One of the world's largest selections. Plus, we're giving you the rebates and the giant Rusty Egg Ford discounts. Imagine getting a brand new $22,000 Ford Escape for only $10,400. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Rusty Egg Ford, yeah, you can't do better than that.
On your mark, get set, go!
Absolutely incredible.
If you don't come see me today, I can't save you any money.
Prices after all discounts, rebates, and government rebates must finish with FMCC on approval credit.
Hello?
Where are you?
The movie theater.
You're supposed to be looking for a job.
In this economy, fat chance. But I'm onto something.
The first-time caller line is 818-501-4721. To talk to George toll-free from east of the Rockies, call 1-800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies toll-free, call 1-800-618-8255. International callers may reach George Noory by calling their in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 1-800-893-0903. From the City of Angels, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Hey, the annual Comic-Con in San Diego is getting underway on Thursday, and it will include a zombie parade that night through downtown San Diego. Our coast-to-coast big affiliate there, Kogo, K-O-G-O, will be attending the very unique convention and posting pictures on their website KOGO.com. In the keyword section, just type in Coast to Coast, and it'll take you straight there. So have some fun if you're down in the San Diego area. Next hour, Greg Little joins us as we talk about the search for Edgar Cayce's Atlantis and mound builders, Edgar Cayce's forgotten legacy as well, and also his work on mounds and earthworks in the United States and elsewhere. And then when we come right back, let's take your phone calls with Dr. Bart Costco as we talk about nanotime, fuzzy logic, heaven in a chip. The feedback I'm getting about DarkMatterDVDs.com is amazing, and it's time quality stories exploring our favorite topics were made. Some of you weren't able to get your free DVD last night, so DarkMatterDVDs.com has generously agreed to do another run of free DVDs and online bonus gifts just for you, plus shipping and handling. You can get it all at DarkMatterDVDs.com or by clicking their link at the bottom of our website. You can leave a message at 800-775-1326. Don't miss out. DarkMatterDVDs.com.
We don't get many second chances. This one could save your life. A TIA, or transient ischemic stroke, is a mini-stroke. Symptoms usually go away within 24 hours and you feel fine again. But if you don't get to a stroke center or hospital fast, you risk a full-fledged stroke that can change your life forever. Don't take that chance. Contact National Stroke Association at 1-800-STROKES or visit stroke.org and find out more about recognizing stroke symptoms fast. Do it now, while there's still time.
This is Dr. Catherine Albrecht with great news for privacy lovers. The world's most private search engine, XQuick, just got even better with a brand new name, StartPage. Now you can get all the internet search engine privacy you've come to love from XQuick through a website that's easier to spell and easier to remember, StartPage.com. Other search engines like Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft record all your searches and store them in a giant database. But StartPage protects your data. They don't record your IP address, make a record of your searches, or use tracking cookies. And best of all, StartPage is totally free. Because it's run by XQuick, it's also third-party certified to protect your data. The only difference is the great new name, StartPage. Please join me in welcoming StartPage to the Internet community. If you don't like Big Brother spying on you, use StartPage.com for great search results and total privacy. Start searching with StartPage, the world's most private search engine.
On air, online, on demand, KFAB.com.
And we're with Bart Costco. Bart, when the day comes where they come up to you and say it's time to implant a chip in you for identification purposes or to be able to buy and sell, are you going to do it?
I think I would pass on that, George.
Yeah.
There are other reasons I might want one, in particular to back up part of your memories or consciousness, but not for the purposes of third-party ID.
I would pass, too. It's going to happen, though. Aren't they going to try to push that one day?
I think it'll happen in subtle ways. I mean, it's already happening in the products we buy.
Right. It's everywhere, yeah.
But it is a little tougher to get inside the skin. I think it's more likely people simply would opt for it. It may have a lot of benefits, after all.
What if they start doing it in hospitals when babies are born? What if that becomes the new mandate?
Well, I just hope we don't live to see that. I don't think that'll happen in this country. It could happen in others. But I think it's more likely people would just do it because, again, it's like carrying a medical bracelet, but much higher quality. There's a lot of advantages to that, but just like using a cell phone, you identify where you are and where you're speaking from at the time. That would happen as well. I don't think it would be imposed by our form of government. Of course, we may well be wrong about that.
True.
I think more likely people would opt for it in a kind of couch potato way.
I do like the possibilities, though, of downloading memory into a chip. And then we can clone each other, Bart, and then we'll be able to live forever.
Maybe not forever, but a substantially longer time than we can now, to a kind of engineering approximation of forever.
They're still waiting for this for baseball great Ted Williams. His head is down in some cryogenic chamber, and they're waiting to download his memory into a chip so they can clone him.
I fully understand that, and I think Ted did the right thing. So that's I'm in the great minority. There are, for example, George, about 150,000 people dying every day, and only about 1,000 actually signed up for that kind of cryonic suspension. As I understand it, fewer than 100 actually in it, including Ted Williams.
Well, they've just got his head, too. That's all. They, I guess, cast away the rest of him. But let's go to Russ in Viejo, California. Hey, go ahead, Russ. Get us going.
How you doing? I was wondering, I ran across the artificial intelligence game, and it changed the rules on me.
How so?
Well, I was beating them so bad that the game actually turned everybody against me.
That's the kind of game you like, right?
Well, no, but the thing was is that I went through the archives in my mind, and the guy only mentioned in his mind that this guy walked up to him and says, "Hey, what happened if he beats it?" And he goes, "Oh, I'll just change the rules." But he didn't write it in the program.
How did this happen?
His thought alone transferred to the program.
That's weird. Bart, have you heard of anything like this?
Well, Russ, I don't think the thought was transferred to the program directly, but it certainly is the case that games are smart and that you program a set of conditions and they watch what you do. And if you always turn to the right, for example, it will take that into account and try to trick you by turning to the left. And so it might look like someone's thoughts were encapsulated that way, but it is ultimately complex patterns of stimulus and response.
What is fueling, Bart, this incredible rapid-fire growth of technology?
It's, I think, Moore's Law. As we digitize things and keep cutting in half the density of, or increasing, doubling the density of computer circuits on a chip, we have immense powers, George, that we're really not using. For example, as you know, this is the 40th anniversary of the moonwalk, and our rockets today are really not a whole lot different from the rockets 40 years ago, except
the computers are.
That's the only difference, the information. The chemistry is basically the same, the physics is the same, but maybe it's doubled or quadrupled, but since then, and we've had this a millionfold increase in the power of computation in those 40 years. And so we obviously have things like GPS and a very different navigation computer system. That's what's different. And a lot of applications don't require a lot of it. Games are kind of interesting because they do require a lot of audio-visual response. And things like modeling the human brain and sensory functions do. But so first order, we have much more computer power than we tend to use, but we're able to do increasingly complicated sensory and even tactile functions. And I think you'll see more of that in medicine, for example, coming. But the answer to your question is to speed up in computation.
Cincinnati, Ohio. Mike, east of the Rockies. Hi, Mike.
Hello, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
I have a question, Bart, about artificial intelligence and the concept of morality and altruism. Obviously, we learn a lot from not just our experiences, but our failures, our pains. Mm-hmm. And what's the current thinking on that and how would that apply to this technology?
I think the game theorists have won the day, Mike. And there's something called an ESS, or an evolutionarily stable strategy. It's based on the Nash equilibrium. If you saw the movie A Beautiful Mind about John Nash, it's that concept. That's at the heart of...
Good movie.
It's a very good movie. A lot of concepts in social science. And so the idea is that something evolves or occurs if and only if it's a Nash equilibrium. I'll give you an example from an op-ed of mine that you can see on my webpage that appeared in the LA Times and elsewhere. This goes way back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau 200 years ago, called the stag game. And if you have four people lost in the woods, and they can either catch a rabbit or a deer, but the catch is this. You can catch a rabbit by yourself, but it's really not enough for you, protein-wise. But the only way you can get a deer is if all four cooperate. So without a government, without someone saying this is the right or wrong thing to do, you will go for a rabbit if the other three are doing that, because there's no incentive to switch to a deer. You couldn't get one. But on the other hand, if three of them are going for a deer, you have an incentive to switch from going from a rabbit to behave what appears to be altruistically to help the others. It's really selfish, though, and get the deer. And that's a new Nash equilibrium.
In this technology, though, if we're actually recreating what we believe the brain to be to the best of our abilities with great intentions, and we're using the same technology, making, let's say, multiple brains, a series of brains, what factors will play into making individuality and the way each of those brains behave as doing an experience?
A real tough one in my book, Heaven and a Chip, deals with that, and there's also an essay of that on my website. But exactly right. When you start having several brains that can talk to one another, to get away from the skulls and talk in a telepathic way, which you'll be able to do once we have real computer uploads and chip implants. Future generations will certainly do that. You then get what's called a dynamical system, and it behaves like a big neural network, each person being like an individual neuron, and you get collective equilibria. Now, we don't know what that would be like. We know that they would occur, but that would be true global consciousness. And actually, we know it would happen. but don't know what the sensation of that would be like or what that kind of complex perception would be like. But I suspect you'd be able to listen to and appreciate much more sophisticated music than we can today.
At what point, Bart, will people be able to go to the robot store and pick up a robot and communicate with it, chat with it, go out with it? I think I'll stop right there.
I think that there'd be a big demand for the latter. And I don't buy the robot line of reasoning, George. I have an op-ed on my webpage criticizing the movie AI and a lot of other movies like that where we try to get machines to think like us rather than the other way around. Robots certainly have a function, doing dangerous tasks and other things. But I think we want more like the powers of a computer, not to mimic our own lumbering walk and gait and the problems of revision that the robot has. You want to be able to think, not 1,000 times faster, but 1,000,000 or billion times faster. You want to think in nanotime, as I call it, entitled the novel Nanotime that. And you'll be able to do that when all or a substantial portion of your brain is backed up or enhanced with a computer chip. And forget the robots. I mean, I think you'd just be the ultimate kind of couch potato, but with immense powers, immense sensory powers, and the ability to imagine things and create entire worlds, in effect, in your mind and to communicate with others, not in the Internet, but in a kind of mind net. And I don't think robots will be a part of that.
The one thing it won't have a soul, Bart. It won't have that.
I would argue that it will. I mean, if the soul...
How?
Well, what is the soul now, or the self? It's a pattern of consciousness. It's a kind of music played by the brain. And the brain is 3 pounds of meat. Well, we can do better than that, George. We can have not 3 pounds of meat, but we can have very powerful microprocessors or plasma devices or whatever it will be, as very elaborate patterns that make up individual identity, the self, the consciousness. And that will be something that you can speed up and indeed replicate. I mean, you get new problems, for example. You could wake up with 5 copies of yourself or 5 million copies of yourself. And that's a problem that the soul has never had to address, the divisibility.
Do you believe consciousness exists beyond the physical brain?
No.
Aha.
I'm one of those.
That's why.
I think Democritus got it right in ancient Greece when he said there's only atoms and void. At the same time, again, I think we can approximate, again, an awful lot of that, all the way down to what most of us would mean by heaven, and almost an indefinite lifespan. Again, if you're thinking at chip times, at nanotimes, 1 million, billion, maybe 1 trillion times faster than now, then 1 minute of current time is going to be not just a year, it's going to be centuries, and you have a lot of minutes left. If I could just give you an example, I had a sports injury, went to a neural expert recently to get a nerve conduction test, and it's a painful thing. They stick needles in you and they measure the nerve response. And I found out, like most people, that my nerves conduct about 50 meters per second. And that same kind of relatively slow speed throughout the body is the basis for current consciousness or soul. We can speed that up dramatically. We don't have to rely on what natural selection is thrown up by happenstance over hundreds of millions of years.
Next up, let's go to San Diego, California, west of the Rockies. Hey, Steve, go ahead.
Well, you can create an artificial mind, and then you can teach it all the world's history and the biographies of all the great men or art and culture. Instead, they turn around and decide to make this new electronic brain insane. Is it just me, or is there something wrong with that?
I don't think the brain is insane. I don't think it's smart enough for that. And I'm also not quite sure what insanity is other than a failure of the circuitry here. But I think the first order, a lot of us would like to have that kind of knowledge of art and history, if only as a chip implant.
Okay, thanks. William in Las Vegas, you're up. First-time caller. Hi, William.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to call and comment on the smart chips. I mean, I think it would be great for us to produce robots with consciousness and whatnot, but, I'm in the military. I work side by side with robots constantly, and I mean, if we allow them to have a consciousness, they're not going to make the same decisions as they would if they didn't have one. Also, I don't mean to sound perverse, but I mean the smart chips would be every guy's dream. But I think the government would definitely take advantage of that situation. I personally wouldn't be comfortable with it, but I also don't think that everybody else wants to be herded up and told to do what to do. So, I don't know. That's my personal opinion on it.
All right,
I think you touch on something, and as a lawyer, this disturbs me. The minute you have any kind of computer backup or implant, and that's coming, it's coming very fast, you have an audit trail. And not just the government, just your neighbor when you get in a car wreck. That's something that may well be admissible, to go back and play it back. What you find about in court often is intent, it's a mental state. That's going to look very different if we can play back portions of the chip. And then when it comes to criminal proceedings or the notion of a quote-unquote hate crime, the ability to take information available on your chip, almost certainly discoverable under the current rules of evidence, is kind of frightening.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to Paul in Illinois, east of the Rockies. Go ahead, Paul.
Hello, Doctor. I was hearing what you were saying about this sort of like a Internet of the Mind, where
MindNet, yes.
Where each individual would be like a single neuron in a global brain.
Yes.
That would be a very dangerous thing. First of all, not everyone could take it. There would be some parts would be subject to the greater parts. That is to say, you would have people who would be under the control of others, like it was in Village of the Damned. Some would actually burn out like fuses in an electrical circuit.
But just a second. If each person had omnipotent-like powers, no one could trick the other. Everyone knew everything. No one could take advantage of one another. They would only participate in the MindNet if they wanted to.
Yes, but the thing is, if they were involuntarily incorporated into this matrix, you would have stronger parts and weaker parts.
Well, that might be a problem if you're involuntarily put into it.
Yes.
But I would think most people want to plug in for the same reason they want to log online today. It would be irresistible to find out, I think, what everyone else is doing, and just to achieve that next level in true global consciousness when you can put all these minds together. But there would also, no doubt, be holdouts who would fence off, and quite reasonably so, and keep their privacy.
Bart, paint a picture for us 10 years from now. What are things like?
Looks like today, but the cell phones are better, the computers are faster and a whole lot cheaper, and there's a lot less privacy.
You see, a lot of people text nowadays. Do you see the time where you can talk into your cell phone and just say what you want, and it just sends it?
I think, a lot of speech translation software is there. As a professor, I have to tell you, George, I don't look forward to that day. It's bad enough for these cell phones going off in class, but at least when they're texting and students are doing that all the time, they're not completely disruptive.
Well, that's true. Let's go back to California, west of the Rockies. Scott, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, George.
Hi.
Oh, nice talking to you. Second time I've tried, second time I've gotten through.
Good for you.
My question's kind of a basic one. On a lot of things, you hear people say that the brain uses a certain percentage of its capacity to function, and I always would look at a computer and see that it would be like in the temporary. It's not on, but a light's blinking. That it's if you hit a key that it would turn on and start the machine up. And my question is, what capacity and how do they figure this of percent of the brain do we actually use? And is it merely that the brain actually, we use 100% of our brain, it's just we're not able to access?
There's an old wives' tale that says it's 10% of it, but don't you believe it. The brain stores about a billion bits of information, or 10 to the 18, and it processes at an incredible rate, though you may not be consciously aware of it. About 10 to the 16 bits or billion bits per second. It's just an astronomical amount of data that's processed, something on the order of that, 500 plus petabytes it's called. And again, you're not aware of that. We think in a serial way, but at the same time, there's an awful lot of subconscious or below-conscious processing, just sensory stuff that you habituate to, the color of the room and the smells and all the complicated processing, maintaining your balance, the contraction of your muscles. Your brain is going 24/7 and using all of that. It can do many other things than it's currently doing, but don't believe that the brain is not fully operational all the time.
If we had a brain race between Einstein and a computer, who would win? The computer, by far?
The computer would win on any kind of direct calculation, like an adding machine calculation. When it came to pattern recognition, today Einstein would still win. He could still recognize someone's face in an image better than most well-programmed computers.
And I bet he would have beaten the original computers.
And I think he would have done that to do it first.
Yeah. Next up, let's take Robert, New Iberia, Louisiana. Got about a minute, Robert. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, hi. Listen, I'd like to expound on that point that the other gentleman made. The scenario of collective consciousness through the use of advanced computers sounds sort of like the Borg from Star Trek. I mean, if you have, I mean, we don't know what this one consciousness would want. Maybe it would need to have more beings included into it in order to exist and to become even more powerful. And in doing so, it would not allow freedom to leave from that consciousness. And also, creating an artificial brain, that's another problem, because who knows? You could have, like, from this Terminator movie, what is it, Skynet? Something that could become self-aware with free will and consciousness of its own, and it could see human beings as its enemy.
I don't think science will stop, though, Bart, will it?
It won't stop. And by the way, I don't think we're going to design computers to have endocrine systems or hormones, so I'm not worried about the Skynet phenomenon. And again, in a kind of mindnet, everybody is omnipotent, like a little computer god. They won't know all the facts, no one can fool anybody, and they participate only if they want to do that. And I would suspect they'd want to do that.
All right,
so
Bart.
We just don't know.
Thank you so much. Bart Costco, as we talk about scientists saying that they'll get to an artificial brain in about 10 years. Up next, Greg Little, as we talk about Edgar Cayce's Atlantis on Coast to Coast AM.
Sign up now for Coast Zone, our free email newsletter. Get it today at coasttocoastam.com.
Don't miss Menard's Door Sale. Discover the advantage of Mastercraft interior and exterior doors. Made in Eau Claire, Wisconsin and other U.S. cities, Mastercraft has been building quality doors since 1970. Choose from thousands of styles and options of Mastercraft steel entry doors. Many are Energy Star rated and qualify for an energy tax credit. Plus, save big on storm doors, patio doors, and garage doors. But hurry, it's the final week of Menard's Door Sale.
Save big money at Menards. We're out to be number one in the USA. That's the reason people say, Rusty Ford, hey, you can't do better than that.
Will somebody please call the law? There's a lot of people fixing to steal a lot of vehicles at Rusty Ford with our giant rebates, giant discounts, and cash for clunkers. This has got to be illegal. Illegal, I tell you. Not.
Best selection on lowest prices, too. That's the reason people choose Rusty Ford, yeah. You can't do better than that.
Brand new 2010 Fusion starting at only $9,800. Brand new $27,000 Ford Taurus is starting at only $11,900. Brand new $17,000 Ford Focus is starting at only $5,500. Call the law.
Rusty Ford, yeah, you can't do.
This is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
And tonight with Greg Little, we go searching for Atlantis. I'm looking forward to this, so that's next on Coast to Coast AM. For years now, the CC Radio Plus has brought us good reception that has allowed many of us to listen to Coast with better clarity, right? Well, now C. Crane wants you to know about the CC Radio 2. This is the radio with the 2-meter ham band. Now, the CC Radio 2, it's the same radio, but with a little better AM reception and a few new features tossed in. For example, it's got the patented twin-coil ferrite antenna built right in there now for superior AM reception. It's got a 2-meter ham band to keep you informed during a local disaster. The weather band, it'll keep you updated on your local weather and other emergencies, and that is a very useful tool. Brighter display, too, for easier viewing. It's a beautiful radio. You can order the new CC Radio 2 for only $159.95. Call C. Crane in the morning at 800-522-8863. That's 1-800-522-8863. If you are computer savvy, visit them online at ccradio.com. That's ccradio.com.
If your elderly loved one needs a helping hand, call Senior Helpers. Senior Helpers is an affordable option that keeps your elderly loved ones living in their own homes. They keep their independence surrounded by everything they know and love. Senior Helpers caregivers make meals, clean house, drive to doctors and the pharmacy. They keep them active and keep them company. Senior Helpers. Trust us like family. Call Senior Helpers at 877-50-HELPERS. 877-50-HELPERS. Or visit seniorhelpers.com.
When it comes to working around the house, never underestimate the value of getting it done right the first time. At your local Ace Hardware, our associates are always ready with expert tips on the smartest ways to get the results you're looking for. We'll give you simple, straightforward advice that will help you save time and money. So the next time you're thinking about starting a project, consider the value of having everything you need just minutes away at your neighborhood Ace, the helpful place.
1110 KFAB. On air, online, on demand.
Dr. Greg Little, psychologist turned explorer and documentary maker since 2003. Greg and his wife, Laura, have been actively searching the Bahamas for archaeological ruins that might be linked to Atlantis, working with the Edgar Cayce organization in the Search for Atlantis project with some new updates and discoveries. And here he is for a complete program tonight on Coast to Coast, Greg Little. Gregory, welcome back.
Well, thank you, George. It's always a pleasure to be here, and my gosh, do we have a lot of ground to cover.
Looking forward. How's family? Everybody okay?
Oh, yes, everybody's good.
Super. You know what? That makes life easier, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. We even took my 84-year-old father into the Bahamas to identify some crashed planes that we'd found.
I love it. You know, we were last on together almost 2 years ago, almost 2 years to the month. It was August of 2007, I think, and lots have changed. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing. Just update myself about you.
Well, actually, when I was on before, one of the things you pressed me on was what was happening in Egypt, and I really couldn't say.
You held back that night.
Well, I had to. There's been a lot going on. The past 2 years has been just incredibly busy, and there's a real mystery that's unfolding here, actually being solved on a lot of different fronts. We've been involved in, of course, searching the Bahamas. We've found numerous 14 planes altogether, and gotten involved in making a number of documentaries for various networks on the Bermuda Triangle, which are about to show. And then we found been involved in really researching and trying to document some structures that are at Bimini that do appear to be buildings on the 10,000 BC shoreline. And then I've been involved in some of the work in Egypt, and there's big news there under the Sphinx and in that area around where the pyramids are. And the search for Cayce's Hall of Records is moving pretty rapidly, and a lot of other things are happening. Cayce's statements about the mounds. I finished a mound encyclopedia, which I actually started in 1982. Long project. So I spent the last year basically finishing that book, which was a monstrous project. And then we did a tour last week and had some strange things happen and discovered some things that were supposedly destroyed in America, which are still there, which directly relate to Atlantis also.
Well, we're going to have our plate full tonight then, aren't we?
Oh, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about this Egyptian situation when you were on with me. I think you were talking about Andrew Collins at that time, but you couldn't say too much. So tell me what's happening there.
Well, I really couldn't say much about it at all, and I didn't know even how to respond to you. I just said I don't even remember what I said. I
think you said no. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I think I did say so. I didn't want to tell an untruth, but I really couldn't say anything else. Basically, back I believe it's 2006, Andrew Collins published a book. He's a British author, pretty well known. Wrote a book called Gateway to Atlantis and numerous other books. But Andrew published a book called The Cygnus Mystery, and it was about the Cygnus constellation, which is best known as the Northern Cross, One of the things that Andrew found in that book, I mean, it's a huge book, as many of these British authors' books are, very well documented, lots of details in it. But one of the things in that book that Andrew had was that the Cygnus constellation could be placed right on top of the pyramids at Giza, better than the Orion constellation. And I know you've had shows on that, and that's all very interesting. And that started kind of a controversy of, is it Cygnus or is it Orion that the pyramids were built on in terms of to symbolize these constellations. But in any event, the problem with Orion is it didn't fit as well as Cygnus. But the other thing is, other than the idea that the pyramids were built to the belt of Orion, it really hadn't led to any other discoveries. Now, with Andrew's idea, which actually was discovered by an engineer by accident, and Andrew included his work in his book, with Andrew's idea, there were many other stars in Cygnus, and a number of us got interested in where do these other stars fit there? Is there anything else there? Is it just another coincidence? So Andrew started doing work on trying to figure out what the other stars of the Cygnus constellation, where they would fall. One of the places that he found was near a well on a hill, which Edgar Cayce talked about a mound that was undiscovered at Giza, where the three pyramids are, and there's a large hill that's called Gebel Gibli, and it has right below it has a Muslim cemetery, and within that cemetery there is a well, and that well is protected. Andrew managed to get into the well and managed to find out that there were tunnels from that well, and that's on the side where the Sphinx is. But the problem was there were other stars of Cygnus, particularly the one that's the brightest star of that constellation called Deneb. And Andrew wondered where Deneb, what was under Deneb. And he went there and he really looked around, but he couldn't find anything. The suggestion was then made to him that perhaps it's an entrance somewhere under the surface. He then returned to Giza, looked around, and then the ARE sponsored more research with him, a couple of expeditions that he went with an Egyptologist, Nigel Skinner Simpson, who went along with him, and his wife. They managed to enter this tomb, which is very close to where Deneb would lay on the ground if the three main stars were on the pyramids. And Cygnus, by the way, is a bird.
Okay.
Particularly a swan. So it's a constellation of a swan. The Native Americans called it a cross. So when he went into this site, he really, this tomb, he looked around. It was a large tomb and couldn't really find anything. And then this Egyptologist, who's from England, found in the British Museum some material from a fellow who had been the British consul to Egypt back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. His name was Henry Salt. It was actually in his memoirs. And Salt had entered this tomb and claimed to have found a tunnel entrance, a cave entrance that led to basically a labyrinth of other tunnels and some huge chambers. He didn't explore the whole thing, and he was with a pretty famous Italian by the name of Caviglia. And that was it. That's all they wrote about it. They went in, it got really dark, they went in several hundred yards, and they turned around and came back out.
Oh, my. Okay.
All right. So, but that has been lost. That journal was like lost. Nobody knew about it. So in that, Andrew said, my God, he found out where this particular tomb was, and it's known as the Tomb of the Birds. It is on the opposite side of the pyramid field, on the west side, whereas the Sphinx is on the east. Very few people go to the west side. In fact, this area is closed off. Andrew then and his wife and the Egyptologist, Nigel Skinner, got some camels, went over. Now, they didn't have permission from the Egyptian authorities to do this.
That's not going to make Zahi Hawass happy, is it?
Zahi is aware of all this now. What they did is, it's not illegal. They got permission when they reached the site to look at it as tourists.
And when Andrew had first gone in, they saw nothing, and he went in again into this big tomb looking for an opening. And they looked all around, and he couldn't find it. And then kind of as a last thing, he sort of looked up, and above this sort of a shelf or a niche, there was a crack. It looked like a crack. And he got up and looked in it, and it opened up into a massive opening on the inside. And he stuck his head in. It was stale. And then a whole bunch of bats came out.
Oh.
He and his wife then went in. It was pitch black. They went through this opening, went into this cave system, and they walked for a distance, and it was like there was no oxygen in the room. It was stale.
I could see that, yeah.
And they could hear a lot of bats moving. They didn't have any flashlights. They were totally unprepared for this. They never thought they'd actually find it.
What were they going in with? A lighter, maybe, just
they
for
took,
a little?
Well, they were using flash cameras, and they took a lot of photographs.
Oh, my.
And so, you know, you get the flash every now and then, so they could see, but they got worried that, well, maybe there's some holes, some shafts that go straight down. So they took a lot of photos. They then returned to England immediately. I mean, Andrew called me basically while they were there, and he called the main people at the ARE and said, we have found this thing. They went back again and actually had more light while they were there. They got a flashlight.
Try to do it the right way this time.
Well, this is still during that first trip. And then he went one more time, which the ARE funded, and they wound up taking some breathing apparatus full because the cave had bats in it. There's a disease called histoplasmosis that bats carry. It's in their droppings, so you have to be very cautious. So they had some breathing apparatus. They had toxic outfits on that could, like hazmat outfits, and they had some breathing material and good lights, which, of course, the British call torches. So they wound up going in several hundred yards, but it was just was hot. The oxygen level was low. And they got to where what some of the works that they've read about in the salt journals, they called them syringes, which is like a tube. And I've actually seen some of those in the Bahamas, where you go into these caves and then they narrow down to a tube that you have to crawl through. And in some of those tubes, when they were crawling through those, they basically stopped because they saw what are known as white widow spiders. These are basically the same thing as a black widow spider, but they never see the light of day. So they are albino widow spiders. So they stopped, got several hundred photographs, I'd say 400 photos, very impressive. There are areas of this system that are very clearly cut by man. Other areas are caves, enormous caves with roofs 20, 30 feet in some cases, room-size openings. And they decided they would not explore it all the way to the end because they weren't prepared to do it all the way, and they knew at that point, well, the Egyptian authorities have to get involved in this. So it was found because it lied, or the opening was exactly where one of the stars of Cygnus, Deneb, which is the brightest star, it was there. And it did follow what this guy Henry Salt wrote in his journal, and it goes toward the pyramids, and it splits off. There are actually several tunnels. They followed several of these. There's at least 3 of them that go to large chambers, and then the tunnels and caves go on, and they may actually go all the way to the pyramids and the Sphinx and actually that well on the other side.
Now, when they were doing this originally, you said Zahi Hawass knows about it now.
Well, he didn't know about it.
He didn't know it then. How do you hide that from him? He's everywhere.
Well, no, he can't be everywhere. He's not one of those computer brains like you talked about the last hour, which is very interesting, by the way.
Yeah.
But Zahi can't be everywhere. It's an enormous area. He does know about it now. The ARE notified him about this. And a number of us had talked about it beforehand. What's he going to say? And we all decided what he's going to say as well. We know about this. We've known about this all along.
Right.
And that is the case. That's what he said initially. And then one of the main people in the ARE met with him privately before Andrew went and met with him privately too. But before Andrew met, the ARE official laid out some of the photos. And Zahi kind of did a double take and said, no, we don't know about this. Now, when Andrew came in sometime later, he did say that he knew about it and it was written up. And so Andrew asked him, well, where is this? Because Andrew had really looked at every single thing written about it. It's not on the main layout of Giza. It's not on Mark Lerner's map of everything that's ever been found there. It's not on anything. And it appears to have been forgotten. Something found in the very early 1800s and then forgotten.
And do you think it still winds its way around, or did they get to the
They did not get to the end because it narrowed down, and they saw the spiders. They were not prepared for those.
No, I don't blame
them. They could hear probably, I think what they heard were more bats, but it just kind of spooked them. I mean, it is pitch black in this place.
Oh, man.
There's virtually no light, and the air is very stale. Somebody that goes in all the way, that you're going to have oxygen.
Absolutely, and lights and everything else. And
they had the lights, and they were prepared for all that, and they got in a long way. But what Andrew did is absolutely remarkable. It may well lead to Cayce's Hall of Records. That is distinctly possible. It makes sense with the Cygnus overlay on Giza. And all this is written up in a book which will actually not come out until September, and it's called Beneath the Pyramids. We've posted an article on our website about it with one photo of Andrew standing in one of the large areas, and I know that's on our website.
If the Hall of Records are there, Greg, and we're going to get into Atlantis and all that in just a moment, but if the Hall of Records are there, and I believe Cayce said they were in 3 locations, Bimini, Central America, and then near the base of the Sphinx.
Right.
What do you think is in the Hall of Records?
Well, we know what Cayce said was in it. Cayce said that there are 32 stone tablets containing the history of humanity from the very beginning until the demise of Atlantis.
Would it echo Genesis, do you think?
I honestly, Cayce's story is somewhat similar. I mean, you could take Genesis, and Cayce actually says, Genesis really doesn't say a lot, God created the heavens and the earth, and that's kind of it.
I mean, the first open parts, that's the best,
Yes. But I think it would fit what Genesis tells us, the little bit that Genesis tells us. But the Atlanteans, we know Cayce's given us some of the story that were on these 32 tablets, and supposedly the Atlanteans began when their consciousness reached the point to where they could write their story. They wrote that everything was basically spiritual in nature, and spirit forced its way or involuted into matter. And it was a conscious choice that our spirit, whatever that is, or our energy, decided to enter matter because it's a different kind of a realm. And it was a level of experience. And from that point on, then evolution obviously occurred because Cayce talked about the different root races that developed and different manifestations of humans.
What about artifacts, flying vehicles, anything that might have been of high technology? Might they be down there too?
Well, according to Cayce, there are some that they have left some weapons and tools, but what Cayce says they've actually left are the instructions for those. Somewhere in those tablets and somewhere else in the Hall of Records are the instructions for all of these high-tech,
almost like blueprints,
esoteric devices.
Huh. Maybe given to them?
The really interesting thing in this, and this, we're actually probably going to talk about crop circles here too. The interesting thing is that the people involved in the whole crop circle search, and Andrew's one involved in that, and the ARE's getting into all these interesting areas now, like crop circles. Cayce didn't talk about crop circles. But what Cayce did say is that when the Atlanteans decided to form these 3 Hall of Records, the reason they did it was that there was a particular priest who got some sort of communication from higher intelligences, clearly not of earthly origin. And these intelligences told this priest that Atlantis was going to be destroyed, and gave this priest the plan to preserve the records of humanity. So there was a higher intelligence involved, and that appears to be the same thing, at least the thing that Andrew says, and what I've also said in my books about the crop circles, that even though probably most of the current ones are probably made by human hands, these people say, and Andrew lives in the midst of them and has interviewed them, these people say that they believe they're being led by some higher intelligence.
What if they were time travelers, Greg?
That's another interesting point, but I can't, I don't know what to say about that.
Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about Edgar Cayce's organization. Edgar Cayce fascinates me. He always did. He's been called the Great American Prophet. We'll be back in a moment with Greg Little on Coast to Coast AM.
Subscribe to After Dark. Call toll-free 1-888-727-5505.
That's exactly what you could win when you play the Lucky 7 Crazy Cash giveaway at Classic Chevrolet Cadillac in Council Bluffs today. We want to give away this mind-blowing amount of money to one person. $500,000. No purchase necessary, no strings attached. It's fun, it's easy, but most of all, someone's got to win. Why not you? And while you're here, take a look at the unbelievable deals on new Chevrolets. If you've got a qualifying clunker, you could buy a new Chevy for $0 down and only $79 a month. $0 down and $79 a month. Malibus are just $19,495. Impalas are only $14,995. Take the I-80 Lake Manawa exit in Council Bluffs to Classic Chevrolet Cadillac and just say, show me the $79 Chevy. Payment based on qualifying trade-in, 84 months at 5.99 APR with approved credit, tax, title, license extra.
Can you keep a secret?
Sure.
I just came up with the most brilliant idea that's going to revolutionize the way companies find employees.
Okay.
An online...
You're going to be able to download past programs 1 year's worth of archives now, and it'll even get even better. It's a great deal. Pennies a day. It's a great way to augment what you do with your favorite radio station. Streamlink, part of Coast to Coast AM. The feedback I'm getting about DarkMatterDVDs.com is amazing, and it's time quality stories exploring our favorite topics were made. Some of you weren't able to get your free DVD last night, so DarkMatterDVDs.com has generously agreed to do another run of free DVDs and online bonus gifts just for you, plus shipping and handling. You can get it all at DarkMatterDVDs.com or by clicking their link at the bottom of our website. You can leave a message at 800-775-1326. Don't miss out. DarkMatterDVDs.com.
We don't get many second chances. This one could save your life. A TIA, or transient ischemic stroke, is a mini stroke. Symptoms usually go away within 24 hours and you feel fine again. But if you don't get to a stroke center or hospital fast, you risk a full-fledged stroke that can change your life forever. Don't take that chance. Contact National Stroke Association at 1-800-STROKES or visit stroke.org and find out more about recognizing stroke symptoms fast. Do it now, while there's still time.
In this stressful economy, smokers are smoking more and being taxed more. It's not fair. Close to 500,000 Americans die every year from smoking. You know the facts. Introducing Smoke Assassin, the electronic smoking device that's just like the real thing. And look, smoke rings of water vapor. We'll give you the Smoke Assassin, a $120 value free. We can't say you'll quit smoking, but thousands quit every day. We can't say it's a healthy smoke, but you do the math. No tobacco, no tar, no chemicals, no poisons, no smoke, no ash, no smelly clothes, and no guilt. You blow out rings of water vapor. Smoke Assassin looks real, it tastes real, and it really satisfies. Call now and get the Smoke Assassin free. Again, it's a $120 value, yours free. Do it for your family, do it for your kids, do it for your health, do it for you, and do it for free.
Yes, do it for free. 800-592-5614 for you or a loved one. 800-592-5614. First 200 callers get one for free. 800-592-5614. That's 800-592-5614.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory, Gregory Little, our guest tonight. Gregory, to talk about Edgar Cayce and really understand Atlantis, we also need to talk about his organization, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Did he form that, or did that get formed after he passed on?
Well, there was an organization before he died, and the organization was one of spirituality and enlightenment also. But yeah, there was an organization. He formed he helped build a hospital, which failed in the Depression. Then, I mean, it was in a very bad time that all this took place with Cayce. But there was an organization, and the ARE though really, which is the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and I just use the term ARE, but the ARE has become a very large organization. And it wasn't nearly that large when Cayce was alive. I'm not sure how many members it really had, but it couldn't have been in the thousands. It was probably 400 or 500 at the time of his death.
I love it. It's a great organization. I mean, and I'm really into alternative medicine, Greg. So I go there and I look at the Edgar Cayce remedies, and it's fascinating.
They really are. It's amazing how many people and how many physicians are in the organization and how many of them use these remedies. There are protocols for all sorts of diseases. The protocols are based on what Cayce said the basic treatment was for all of these different diseases. But he also said that it depends upon the individual. You just can't take one treatment and apply it to everybody that has the same disease. It depended upon the individual's body. But there are a huge number of physicians in the organization. You know, some people will portray it as a sort of far out there organization that is, they use the term New Age. They like to throw that out and talk about it being preposterous. But they don't realize the number of professionals in the organization, everything from physicians to nurses, all different people in the medical field, psychologists, you name it, educators. There's probably as many MDs and PhDs and various professionals as in any other organization. And it's a large organization.
The Cayce readings, for us, of course, even if there's one person who just hasn't heard of him, most of us have. Explain a little bit about Edgar Cayce and these trance-like readings that he would do.
Well, you know, Cayce was born in 1877 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. That you always hear that when anybody wants to describe Cayce. The thing that you have to remember is in 1877 there wasn't a lot of medical treatment. It was very crude then. The other thing is this. Hypnosis was actually a very, very new thing, and it started out being known as mesmerism. And what happened was Cayce had an ailment, and his ailment was he lost his voice. And a stage hypnotist came into Hopkinsville, and Cayce's friends encouraged him to go up on the stage. He was hypnotized on stage, and he was able to speak. Everybody was shocked because he had voice paralysis. Later, under hypnotic trance, Cayce actually was asked by the hypnotist what was wrong with him. And he said, here's what's wrong with the body. And he then told the hypnotist, make a suggestion to Edgar Cayce. Of course, this is Cayce's voice speaking, but make a suggestion to Edgar Cayce to increase the flow of blood around the neck and the throat. Well, the hypnotist was kind of stunned by it, but he did it. He said increase the amount of blood flow to the neck and the throat. He did. Everybody watched this. It got blood red. Cayce then was brought out of the hypnotic trance by the hypnotist. He spit some blood out, and then he could talk. And that's really where it started. Some local physicians got interested in this. They had heard about it. It actually made the newspaper that here's this guy that everybody liked who could now talk. And some physicians then tried hypnosis on him and decided that, well, if he could heal himself, maybe he can heal others. So they would hypnotize Cayce and then ask him questions about other people. And he had total amnesia when he came out of the hypnotic trance about what he'd said. And he often was, he'd ask him, what did I say? What did I say? But in these hypnotic trances, they would describe an individual to him and tell him where this individual was. And then he would literally kind of do a diagnosis of the person's problem. John Van Alken of the ARE calls him a psychic diagnostician, where you would tell him, here's the person, here's where they are, and Edgar would say, yes, I have the body, and then he would go on to describe what the physical problem was, and then he'd go on to describe a remedy if one actually existed, or if they needed to make one, or if it was already too late. And often Cayce would say, well, here's the problem and here's the remedy, but this person is not motivated and is not going to do anything about it. And that happened from time to time. But the remedies that Cayce gave have actually been tested by various researchers, physicians who tested it. And because it was 80-some% accurate, generally the numbers that are given in the scientific studies are 83 to 88% accuracy.
Huge.
Yes, very high. But that doesn't mean the others were wrong. It just means they can't necessarily tell whether or not the remedy worked. There was no way for them to follow up.
Sure.
But because of that, Cayce was actually dubbed by the American Medical Association in an editorial the father of American holistic medicine. Cayce literally was the first person to come up with holistic medical practices in America. And a lot of the things that are done today came from Cayce. It's amazing. It really
amazing.
is. So he had all this health stuff, and that's where he became famous. The New York Times called him a sleeping prophet. There was a medical association meeting in New York in 1910 where a group of physicians presented a paper about Cayce at an American Medical Association meeting. The New York Times had a reporter there, and he was just enthralled with it, and he wrote an article and dubbed Cayce a sleeping prophet. And from that moment on, Cayce was inundated with letters from people trying to get help for their physical remedies.
All right. Now, how did Atlantis come up in some of these readings?
Well, that's a very interesting thing, too. That really popped up in 1923. Until 1923, Edgar Cayce's readings all had to do with essentially physical health. In 1923, there was a gentleman named Albert Lammers who brought Cayce. Actually, he took him several different places. Cayce was actually professionally, he was a photographer. He was an award-winning photographer. He won some national awards from the Kodak company. But this Lammers literally brought Cayce to several hotels, the Cayce family, and without actually telling them what he was going to ask him, he started asking him what would be considered metaphysical questions. And it kind of blindsided everybody. But that is when, in 1923, is when Edgar Cayce first mentioned Atlantis. It's also when most of these, almost all of the other metaphysical things about Cayce, like past lives, the ancient history of the world, and that a lot of the people that were alive today had actually been intimately involved in that ancient history, which is, of course, reincarnation. And that scared him very much. But that's how it emerged. And a lot of this is really odd. The first mention, for example, of Bimini, which is a really tiny Bahamas island, it was odd. There was a group of people in Florida, businessmen, and this was in 1923, brought him to Florida, to the Halcyon Hotel, and they were interested in developing Bimini, basically to try and find oil there. And Cayce said there is no oil there, but it's the highest portion of once a great continent. They didn't ask another question about it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said. But this is the highest portion of what was once a great continent. And he meant Atlantis. Now, the next time, Cayce mentioned that there was gold buried there, specifically 120,000 gold coins and silver, which actually would not be that unusual since that was all basically in the midst of pirate treasure areas. In the Bahamas, we know for certain that there was pirate treasure there. So they asked Cayce where this treasure was, and he told them, and they tried to find it, and they couldn't. They then came back and asked him why, and he said their motives were not pure. And then they started asking him more questions about Atlantis.
And that's where we got some of these incredible stories.
Well, yes, we got that really started. Interestingly, the only Cayce readings that are gone that aren't there in their entirety. There's roughly 14,400 readings. He's the only psychic probably who ever lived where virtually everything he said was written down and could be tested, which is astounding if you think about it. There's 50,000 pages of readings at the ARE, all of which now can be accessed on the Internet, particularly for members, and it's very easy to do. But 50,000 pages. And imagine if a person went through life and everything they said was written down, and you could test it later. A lot of us say things that turn out to not be true, and a lot of us give opinions about things that turn out to be wrong sometimes. But everything he said is there, and it's accessed by researchers. And he really opened himself up for a tremendous amount of scrutiny. But that's been very helpful for a lot of us. It's allowed us to take his readings and, for example, find every single thing he said about mounds. There's 68 readings on mounds. Everything he said about Atlantis. There's 700 readings which mention Atlantis. Everything he said, for example, about Peru, or everything he might have said about the Gobi Desert or pyramids there or Egypt. We can now pull all of those out through computer searches and then literally compile them, lay them out, organize them, and then test them, see how accurate they are. And that's what's being done.
How did he describe Atlantis, Greg?
He described Atlantis initially as an empire, a large empire extending basically from the Straits of Gibraltar all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Some people have said that it was a solid mass of land, which is impossible. But Cayce never said that it was a solid mass of land. What most of us believe that the sea levels we know were lower than. There were a lot of islands out there. Mm-hmm. He said that the Atlanteans actually lived their lives in ways very similar to what we do. They did have a totally different kind of a technology where they did use energy. They probably were the first green people on Earth. They were using the sun's energy to generate electricity almost exclusively, and they did it by focusing the rays of the sun using crystals. He also said they had certain kinds of flying ships. There's really no doubt about that, although it's a little that gets a little weird because he talks about them using what we would today call blimps or dirigibles. And they sounded somewhat primitive, and
it doesn't sound like high technology.
That wasn't high tech, but apparently they had a way to propel these using this crystal technology, and they could also communicate over vast differences. But other readings talk about devices which sound exactly like elevators, other kinds of aircraft, submarines. High-tech houses that had where people had energy. He doesn't say they had electricity with wires, but they had all kinds of appliances and things, and obviously those required some sort of energy.
It almost seems like a simple society with high-tech equipment, not the kind of equipment we use today. I don't think they had microwave ovens and things like that.
Right.
But, and they probably still lived in stone-type housing, but they had the ability to use electricity, like you said, harnessing it from the sun. Maybe they made batteries. Maybe they had things. So they had high technology in a very low-tech environment, I would say.
That's a really good way of putting it. If you think about it, on the Earth today, we have lots of countries where it would be very primitive.
It's like Star Wars. I mean, you look at their houses, right? Yeah. And they look like stone huts. Yet they've got flying ships and all these incredible things.
Mm-hmm. Well, stone is actually a very good building tool. If you want something to last, you build it from stone. And actually, there's a great series been showing about when people are gone. I think it's on the History Channel, and it really shows something. Edgar Evans Cayce, who's Edgar Cayce's grandson, who's still alive.
Yes.
I know you've had him on your show
before.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I promoted as saying a discussion with Edgar Cayce.
Yes.
Which is true.
Yes. Well, Edgar Evans has pointed out for years, and he did this actually back in the 70s initially. He said that a high technology is the easiest to destroy, and that if we sank an area of America where we have computers and automobiles and planes and other things, it's going to be gone in no time. There won't be a trace that can be found. And actually, our search of the Bahamas, we found a lot of things like planes that are just 20 and 30 years old, and they're almost totally deteriorated. The salt water,
just eats away at it.
Yeah, it just destroys them. It's amazing how quickly tires can be destroyed. But a high technology is easy to destroy. Stone, on the other hand, does stand the test of time. The Great Pyramid, the other pyramids for that matter, they're made of stone. And they're actually in pretty darn good shape. They're not going to last forever, but they've certainly been there longer than the building I'm in will be, or probably any building in the United States of America isn't going to last as long as the pyramids have.
What happened to Atlantis?
Well, both Plato and Cayce pretty much agree on that, and Plato's story is relatively simple at the end. Plato said that when Atlantis ended, which was around 9600 BC, according to Plato, the Atlanteans had tried to conquer the world, particularly inside the Mediterranean, and that as retribution for getting their connection to divinity or to God, that's actually in Plato's story. That's similar to Cayce. And because they had their arrogance in trying to conquer the world, that something essentially came from the sky and destroyed them. That is very much what Plato said. And that they sank in a day and a night. Their main island sank in a day and a night. He called them an island empire also. Edgar Cayce's story is slightly different. He doesn't tell us exactly what destroyed it, but he did say that certain portions of Atlantis, particularly in the mountains and so on, whatever was mountainous, and particularly the people who were very primitive, like the people who lived in the mountains or the people who lived on farms, and particularly in high land, that they watched as this disaster befell everybody else. And the lands near the water, the lands near the ocean, ports and so on, that those were all destroyed. And Cayce doesn't tell us what it was, but it sounds like, from everything he said, a cataclysm from the sky. But again, Cayce actually gave us a much longer history of Atlantis, and there were 3 destructions of Atlantis, according to Cayce, whereas Plato only talks about the last one. But they both give the same ending date, around 10,000 BC.
But they had some time to flee.
Yes, they had time to flee. Cayce was real specific. They fled 3 different times. One was 50,000 BC, or 52,000 years ago, which would have been a mind-boggling statement even 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, even though we were saying it then. Now you're hearing, even here in America, that some mainstream archaeologists are arguing that there were people here as long ago as 50,000 years. And Cayce did say that some Atlanteans fled to America 50,000 years ago in the first destruction. Some also went to South America. Some of them went to Egypt. Some of them went to the area between France and Spain, the Pyrenees Mountains, and others went to the Gobi Desert, which wasn't a desert at the time. Cayce then says the second destruction was around 28,000 BC, and again the Atlanteans fled the same places, and the third and final destruction was in 10,000 BC. And that's when large groups of people emigrated from the lands. And again, that goes back to where we started from, and that was this communication that this key priest got from some sort of intelligence, which every way you read it, it sounds extraterrestrial, and he even says it was from other worlds. Whether or not it would be like a visitor from another world, like a UFO, or it was something mental, I tend to look at it like it was some sort of a mental intelligence, a mental communication that he got. It could be interpreted otherwise, though.
Absolutely. Well, when we come back, Greg, I want to talk with you about some of your work out there in the Bahamas and some of the discoveries that you've made. We'll also talk about the crop formations that you talked about with Andrew Collins and see what he has come up with. What's your website, Greg?
Well, the two really, go to www.edgarcayce.org. There's a special offer there for coast-to-coast listeners. It's right on their homepage, edgarcayce.org. And my site is mysterious-america.net.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.
To access the audio archives of Coast to Coast AM, log on to coasttocoastam.com.
It's hard to talk to your kids about the S word because they're too young to think about bedroom activities. So you try to limit their exposure to adult behavior. But let's be honest, there's birds and bees stuff all over the place. On TV, 64% of programs include, the internet's even worse. 42% of kids between 10 and 17 have inadvertently seen, funny business online. It's everywhere.
We know that S word makes you uncomfortable. It's embarrassing, but you've got to be the parent. You've got to talk to us about sex, because everyone else is, and they're not talking about waiting. That part's up to you. You don't have to be explicit about it. You don't have to talk about the parts. Just tell us how you feel. Tell us what to do. Tell us you want us to wait to do that stuff. For help starting the conversation, visit forparents.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and this station.
Amanda, age 3. Tyler, age 8. Marissa, age 4.5.
We could tell you just how many child abductions last year led to Amber Alerts.
Shaniqua, age 14. Ryan, age 9.
But this isn't about cold statistics. It's about safe.
From somewhere out there, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
And our special guest tonight, Greg Little, as we talk about his work now in the Bahamas area, searching for Atlantis. A good, small, portable radio can be difficult to find, but not when you know about C. Crane. They've developed the CCSW Pocket, a great pocket radio to have with you when you travel or wherever you may go. C. Crane's new SW Pocket covers AM and FM and shortwave, gets reception better than any radio in its class, has the ability to take 200 memories that are enough to save all your favorite stations. Great audio, too, for its size. 2 AA batteries run the little pocket, and they last up to 70 hours. And you can have an optional AC adapter if that's how you want to use it. Small enough to just tuck in your briefcase, in your pants, in your purse, wherever you want. SW Pocket, right now. It's got great reception no matter where you go. You can order the SW Pocket for only $49.95. You can also call them and get a free catalog. C. Crane, call them in the morning at 800-522-8863. That's 1-800-522-8863, or go online, ccradio.com.
Have you ever thought about saying goodbye to your job? Just walking into your boss and saying, I quit. And how would you like to commute to work without ever leaving your home? Well, not long ago, a 39-year-old entrepreneur from a billionaire family spent $20 million in 3 years to find the best home-based business in North America. He researched 70 different companies, and when he found the only one that had real long-term potential, he bought it. And right now, he's looking for people to help him turn this company into his next billion-dollar success story. So if you're serious about making money from home without having to leave your home, well, grab a pen. Because I'm about to give you the address of a website where you can learn all about this unique and rare opportunity. Write this down, www.goherenext.com. Now get on your computer and go to this site now. Part-time or full-time, your income is based totally on your performance. Interested? GoHereNext.com and say goodbye to your boss tomorrow. GoHereNext.com.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
All right, Greg, tell us about your progress in the search for Atlantis out there in the Bahamas.
Well, we've been focusing in the Great Bahama Bank, all of it, and also around Bimini. One of the things that happened, we started finding planes, and of course that got some notice, and we wound up doing a number of shows for various networks on the Bermuda Triangle. But the ARE has been doing several things. One of those is having a group go in of professionals routinely using side-scan sonar, sub-bottom profiling, also using remote underwater video, and now high-tech divers who can go down and stay for hours at a time. And we have been focusing in on an area which actually is right on the 10,000 BC shoreline, which means it's roughly at 90 to 110 feet deep. We started looking at an area actually because of a project done by a California archaeologist by the name of Bill Donato back in November of 2006. Donato did a project for the ARE that they sponsored, and it was a side-scan sonar project, and they looked at all of the area really of what's called West Bimini, from Bimini toward Florida, and it was a huge square area. In one particular area where this 10,000 BC shoreline is, and we know that in 10,000 BC, the sea level in the Bahamas was at really 110 feet lower than today. Most people know that in the Ice Age it reached 300-plus feet lower, but by 10,000 BC, the sea levels were only 110 feet lower.
Huh, didn't know that.
So we've gone to this, what he did was did the side-scan sonar. He found this area that had these rectangular formations, square and rectangular formations, right on this sort of a ledge where it then fell off. He tried to dive it. This is very close to the Gulf Stream, and they could not get down. It's just too dangerous. So when he got back, Bill Donato gave us the information, and we got the coordinates from him. We went out actually 4 or 5 times after that. We have our own side-scan sonar in our boat. We found the same formations. The first time we found them, we managed to drop an anchor right inside of one of these rectangular formations. And at the time, I did not have my dive equipment, so we had a master diver with us by the name of Esley Brown and his wife, Krista. They had their diving gear, and they went down, and they snapped one photograph. And the reason they could only do one is the currents were so strong they had to hang on to a rope, and they couldn't see anything. It was so murky. When we got the photograph back to the States, I wound up trying to look at it, and all you could see was just murkiness, and they said it looked like coral down there. I then converted the photo to black and white, and this was back in 2007 when we did this. Converted the photo to black and white, and lo and behold, what it looked like was blocks sitting on top of blocks, building blocks, like larger than bricks, but like ancient building blocks on top of each other. So we decided we've got to go back and look at these structures. Well, we tried again and again. We could not even anchor out there because of the currents. Back in this past January, we went back to Bimini with a History Channel crew working on a show for a new series called Mystery Quest, which starts in the fall. Their 4th episode was going to be on Atlantis, and they really wanted to focus quite a lot on Bimini. And as it turns out, the main focus will be on Bimini.
And thanks for the pictures you supplied us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Got them out there at Coast to Coast.
Some of those are extremely interesting. You can see blocks on these structures. So we got there. They hired a very professional diver, and everything they're doing is in high definition now. So they got this guy, and we could not anchor on this spot. We looked at what's called the Bimini Road, which is a stone formation. It's called a road, but it's not a road. We think it's a harbor. We looked at that. We did work there. We did work at other sites, pulled up some ancient anchors and so on, and that was all impressive. We showed them a lot of great things, but we got out to the site, and that was going to kind of be the highlight of the show. And the current was so bad, we had 2 boats, ours and a backup boat or a safety boat, and none of us could get an anchor to even hold. The 2 master divers and the 2 boat captains that we had along both said, we're not going to do this. It's too dangerous. And our diver, who had the high-definition camera video, he said he's not going to get in the water. It's just too dangerous. So what happened was they went back and they made 2 shows. One was on the Bermuda Triangle, and the other one was on Atlantis. And the Bermuda Triangle one, the network really liked, and because we took them to some planes that had been previously never found, that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, so they got to see some of those. And the network then watched their show, at least the first part of it, on this Atlantis thing, and they got so hyped up when we're going to look at this 10,000 BC shoreline, which is where Plato's and Cayce's Atlantis would be. we're not going to find it on the surface. It's going to be in the 10,000 BC shoreline.
Right.
And then we get out there, and then, okay, we can't do it because the weather's too bad and the currents are too bad. And they then told them, you've got to go back and do this. And it so happened that we were at Bimini again when they called us, and we were doing a show with the National Geographic on the Bermuda Triangle, which we'll show sometime this fall also. We took them to some different plains, which turned out to be Bermuda Triangle plains. So while we were there, they said, we want to come down and meet you. And, okay, so we did 2 weeks later. They came back to Bimini. And as it turned out, we were there early before then. And so my wife and I have a remote camera video that we can take down really pretty deep. And the weather turned out to be good, and we literally floated over these formations and got over 3 hours of video of them. So we knew pretty well what they were going to look like by the time the History Channel got there again. And when they got there, they brought their high-definition cameraman back, and my wife and I then dove it, which actually it's a very dangerous dive. And for the first 70, 80 feet going down, the current was so strong we had to be tethered to the anchor line. But as soon as we got down to about 80 feet, it was like dead. There was no movement at all, and the water was just crystal clear. So we got a very good look at these formations. The high-definition film is just incredible. The high-definition underwater film, I've never seen anything like it. It's like the water's not even there. It's just amazing. But what we found is this, and I counted these from our side-scan sonar images. We went over this one area, and this one area we focused on has 35 square and rectangular formations laying on the bottom. And when you look at this, it's like a flat, sandy desert. It's perfectly flat, and it falls off to the old shoreline. So it's flat, and there's white sand everywhere, but then scattered around at regular intervals, all oriented in the exact same way, are these 35 square and rectangular formations. Some of them have straight sides, others have angular sides, like you'd see almost with a pyramid almost. They are all oriented the same way. The sides are very straight. A couple of them have what look like ramps. They're totally covered in coral.
Definitely man-made.
I'll tell you where we are almost certain they are, and that is when you look at them, when you go up and down the sides, like with the video, and we've had to use the video camera for this, you can see building blocks on the sides of these, like we're looking at the foundations or the sides of what were once buildings along the 10,000 BC shoreline. Now, what I haven't told you is this other group that is working is only like 100 yards to 200 yards away from where these are. And this one is being done strictly through the ARE central office, and there is a lot of stuff there. And the belief now is that this is a almost metropolis. And that's not my word. I'm using it, of course.
Which was once a booming metropolis.
It appears to be a coastal area that was a booming maritime port. Call it a metropolis or whatever. But it's right on that shoreline, and there is a lot of stuff there. No one has looked there before because the stuff closer to shore is easier to access, and this is just very difficult to get to and look at because the currents are so strong. They're dangerous. It is a very dangerous spot to go and look at, to dive. But these look like buildings. I mean, I don't know what else to say about them. I'm asked about them a lot. We've got a lot of film of them. The high-definition film is good, but even when he went down, he used what looks like a torpedo to propel himself around carrying his camera, and he could only go in one direction. Now, the cameraman who had the high-definition film found some areas in these where they had straight, like a T-shape cut into the sides of some of them. So it looks pretty clear that they were man-made. We've done a lot of research on coral reefs, talked to coral reef experts, and all of them say this doesn't look like a coral reef. It's coral, but it's not a reef because these are all square and rectangular formations.
How far down, Greg, might the rest of Atlantis be into the ocean? Does it go down miles?
Well, they have looked down. This is where I feel really uncomfortable with some of this, but they've gone down now at Bimini. it looks like there's some stuff as far down as 300 feet, which makes sense. I mean, Atlantis would have existed in 17,000 B.C., and the 300-foot level in the Bahamas, 300 foot below current sea level, was in the last ice age, and the height of that was around 17,000 B.C. or 19,000 years ago. And Atlantis would have existed then. It didn't just pop up from nowhere and then disappear. So it appears there's some stuff at Bimini at 300 feet, too, that's similar to this, and it looks like it just keeps going on down. And all of these structures are, they look man-made. And none of this is really, this is actually the first, other than our website, which we really put these stories up the last couple months in anticipation of releasing some of this. The only way for people to know this kind of information is actually it's told to the members of the ARE because they've sponsored most of the research, so they hear it all first.
Tell me a little bit about your work with Andros.
Andros Island is Andros is the largest of the Bahama Islands. The main thing that we found at Andros was a lot of planes. There's a tremendous number of planes that we found all over there. There is a structure that we call the Andros platform. And actually, another show that we did was with the show UFO Hunters. They wanted to look at the Andros platform. And the main reason that they were interested in that was because I had gone into AUTEC. When we were there with the History Channel, we took them over to Andros to show them some planes and go to some that were underwater off the coast. And a guy from Memphis, actually an actor who went with us, who assists us quite a bit in filming, he and I took our boat down the tongue of the ocean at night, which is incredibly stupid. Because it's that side of Andros has a long reef, and at night you can't see to get through it. But we took this boat down about 100 miles to central Andros and had to go through the reef, and there was only one way through. Only one area had lights, and that was the AUTEC.
It's like a James Bond movie.
Yes, that's where AUTEC is actually the James Bond movie Thunderball.
Really?
Is based on that.
Okay.
Well, one of the shows UFO Hunters did about 2 months ago was on AUTEC, which they call the Navy's Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Atlantic Undersea Evaluation and Testing Center. And it is, AUTEC actually has been collecting cosmic rays from Cygnus at the bottom of the ocean there. That's how bizarre this place is. And that research is actually can be accessed because it was done under a grant that one of the California universities did there. So whatever they have there can collect and evaluate cosmic rays that go all the way through the ocean down about 8,000 feet to the bottom. In addition, we went into AUTEC. We went into the outer harbor, went into the second harbor, and then went into the tiny little harbor in the inside. We were ordered out immediately, yelled at, screamed at, and I just told them I didn't know where we were. But there was a stealth craft in there. Actually, it was a stealth boat that looked like a missile frigate to me. When I got back, I kind of looked at various things. And, of course, that'd be a good place to test stealth boats, stealth ships, because they have the most sophisticated radar in the world there. And the radar really is tremendously powerful off of Andros. It's so powerful that satellite phones don't work anywhere there.
Jeez.
The History Channel's satellite phones didn't work. Ours didn't. And people there said, no, don't even bring them because they don't work anywhere here. But they wanted the UFO hunters were interested in that AUTEC experience, but for some reason the only thing they wanted to do was to look at the Andros platform. But they took the first high-definition underwater film of that and pretty much came out saying it's man-made, and it does look man-made. Their film looked even better than anything we've ever taken.
Just so many mysteries on this planet.
Well, there are. North of Andros, in an island chain that's attached to it called Julters, there's another stone wall up there, very obviously man-made. It's an enigma. We have no idea who built it. It's not a pirate wall. We know that. It makes no sense because it's in really shallow water, and there's no way you could even get hardly a rowboat in there. You have to have a boat that has a draft of a foot, no more than a foot, to get in and out of this place. But none of this makes any sense around Andros. On the western side of Andros, where the Great Bahama Bank is, there are hundreds of odd spots, and we found what we believe are a couple of, I'll call them shell mounds. America's mound culture, some of the oldest shells or mounds are along the coast, and they're called shell mounds. They're made in the shape of donuts, actually. They have a lower part in the center, but they have an elevated ring. And we found a couple of those on Andros, which no one has ever acknowledged that there's any archaeological sites like that anywhere in the Bahamas, but they're very clearly there. They've just never been explored. Nobody is exploring the Bahamas archaeologically.
Why not?
I think, well, number one, money, but number two, it's a pariah. Ever since 1968, with the discovery of the Bimini Road, and the first people saying they found Atlantis, and then you've got the skeptics who stepped in and said this is all nonsense. This is how bad it is. This is an amazing story. When we went with the History Channel, and we knew we were going to have good weather, they tried to get an archaeologist and a geologist to go along. They could not find a single archaeologist who would even go to Bimini, because to even go acknowledges there might be something there, and their careers would be ruined. They would not get any grants. They would be basically shunned by all their peers to go. And if they actually found something that was very clearly man-made, they couldn't possibly ever say that because it would destroy them. That's the problem.
Because you've done some work in the Bermuda Triangle, when we come back after the break, we'll talk about that area as well. Many things have fascinated me about that section. I had a chance to talk to Joe Bullard about it, one of our past guests as well. Lots of strange things going there. I remember seeing a movie a long time ago about Atlantis. They had a massive size crystal, huge, and it sank. The whole island sank. And they claimed in the movie that that's what is causing the problems around the Bermuda Triangle, this power crystal from Atlantis. Any take of that?
Well, that is based on Edgar Cayce. That does not come out of Plato's Atlantis. That is Cayce's story of Atlantis. They had this crystal. The crystal was it wound up in the end being used as a weapon before that, and before that it started out as a way to communicate with God in the spirit world. And then they discovered it could collect energy, and then they discovered it could focus these rays and be a weapon. And so the story of Edgar Cayce's is there were these crystals that were there. You'll hear a lot of people say that when Atlantis was destroyed, the crystals weren't actually destroyed. They simply sank when Atlantis sank, and that they sometimes get active. And when they're active, they can disrupt magnetic compasses and electronics. That is the story. I'm not saying I necessarily believe that. I know there's some pretty weird things going on there because I've talked to people that have had experiences there, lots of them. And then there's a reason why these planes are crashing, and it's not all that bad pilot mistake, pilot error or mechanical error. There's other things going on there. So there is something going on in the Bermuda Triangle.
We'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about your work with mounds in ancient America and their significance. I'm George Noory. Back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. If you need to email me, that's George at Coast2TO, coasttocoastam.com. And also don't forget, the After Dark newsletter is available to you by calling 1-888-727-5505.
1110 KFAB.
Heart expertise. When it's your heart, there are many hospitals that offer care. But there is only one hospital that has the expertise to offer hope when others cannot. One hospital that leads in innovative treatment for electrical problems of the heart. One hospital in the state that has developed mapping techniques and pioneered safer therapies to treat irregular heartbeats. One hospital with the first and only nationally certified heart attack program in Nebraska. And recognition by J.D. Power & Associates for providing an outstanding cardiovascular experience. Only the Nebraska Medical Center. To find a heart specialist, call 800-922-0000 or go to nebraskamed.com and do it today. Because when it's your family, there is only one. The Nebraska Medical Center. Serious medicine. Extraordinary care.
While you're at work, Fido's working over your house, shredding newspapers, eating pillows. What can you do? Bonjour.
You'll have an opportunity to chat with Greg Little, but it'll be my turn when I come right back on Coast to Coast AM.
We don't get many second chances. This one could save your life. A TIA, or transient ischemic stroke, is a mini stroke. Symptoms usually go away within 24 hours and you feel fine again. But if you don't get to a stroke center or hospital fast, you risk a full-fledged stroke that can change your life forever. Don't take that chance. Contact National Stroke Association at 1-800-STROKES or visit stroke.org and find out more about recognizing stroke symptoms fast. Do it now while there's still time.
As a Major League Baseball umpire for over 30 years, I've learned focus is everything. That's why I switched to a complete multivitamin with more. Only one-a-day Men's 50-Plus Advantage has both ginkgo for memory and concentration, plus support for heart health. Centrum can't give you all that. And in this game, I want every advantage.
One-a-day Men's 50-Plus Advantage, the official multivitamin of Major League Baseball.
When you're protected by Identity Guard, we'll help you actively oversee your overexposed identity, leaving you with a deep sense of liberation.
I will boldly buy gift pajamas online and bid on cheese sculptures at online auctions.
Identity Guard scans everything from credit bureaus to shady internet sites, alerting you if anything fishy is going on.
I will keep my money my money. That is until I buy something. Then it's somebody else's money.
And should the unthinkable occur, you can count on the Identity Guard professional response team to be there for you.
I don't have that creepy feeling when I share my personal information anymore. And I say, good riddance.
Not to mention our $1 million loss insurance.
I am going to turn more online total strangers into my closest online best friends.
Get that someone's got my back feeling with Identity Guard and live a more streaming life. Call 877-ID-GUARD now or visit IdentityGuard.com. That's IdentityGuard.com.
On air, online, on demand, KFAB.com.
Greg, let's finish up here with the Bermuda Triangle and talk about your work on the mounds around this country. The planes. Tell me about these planes you found.
Well, we saw some planes the very first time we went to Andros on the ground and in the water, and we started this in 2003. We started this actively being explorers, looking for Cayce's halls of records, and for that matter, looking for any remnants of Atlantis we could find. But starting in 2003, in flying over Andros, I saw these planes on the ground. And at the time, it didn't register. I just thought, those are really interesting, and I'd ask locals about them because they're in remote places. And the standard answer you get everywhere in the Bahamas of any plane is that it's a drug runner. And it is true that the Bahamas had a lot of drug runners, particularly in the 1960s and 1970s. But it just seemed odd to me, all these drug-running planes. So then we started visiting a few of them on the ground, and I realized a lot of these planes have N numbers on their tails. And that's the basic identification number. You can tell exactly what the story is with the plane. And some of these planes were clearly crashed and nobody survived. Others were intact. And then quite by accident, we had seen this from the air. There was a tail of a plane at what's called Red Bays on Andros. It's the only occupied area in western Andros, and it's actually a place where the Seminole Indians fled in 1823 at the Trail of Tears. And it's just odd how these things worked out. And the Seminoles actually got in canoes when they were ordered out of Florida to go to Oklahoma with the Trail of Tears. And instead, a large group went to the Bahamas. They wound up in western Andros where they hid. And the modern place of Red Bays is their remnants, and actually Esley Brown, who we work with, is one of them. But at Red Bay, we found this tail. And the end number was not intact on it, but we could push the pieces together enough. And lo and behold, this plane turned out to be one that disappeared in 1984. But it disappeared in Grand Turk, which is 700 miles from where we found it. So then I got on there's actually a master list of every single plane that has been reported to disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. And you can get in the National Transportation Safety Board's database and find out what the story is in a lot of these. And so I wound up verifying this was a plane that disappeared. It took off in Grand Turk with 2 people in it. The pilot, as soon as the pilot took off, before he was even at altitude, he radioed back to, it was an uncontrolled airport, which means there's really no tower or anything. He radioed back, and somebody hurried him, and he said, I'm turning back because I forgot to refuel my plane. Well, he was never heard from again or seen again. They sent a small plane out to look for him, couldn't find anything.
Nowhere to be seen. Huh?
Yeah, they've never found again. There's no FAA. We've been there when planes disappeared before. And we can tell you stories about that, about seeing what the search is. But we found the tail of this 700 miles from where the plane radioed from. It's just odd. Now, I could trace the movements of this tail, looking at the movements of the water currents there, and yes, it could have gone 700 miles. We found the plane tail in 2004 is when we first found it. Oddly, when we took the History Channel there, locals had drug that back out into the ocean, and they're using it now as an artificial reef.
The story of the missing Avengers.
Yes,
Flight 19. That also is fascinating.
Well, we are, believe it or not, we are looking for those too. We've decided we've really studied this. The History Channel, we've talked to them about it, National Geographic. Flight 19, if you know the story, the head pilot actually told on the radio.
5 planes, right?
Yes. He actually said he thought they were over the Florida Keys and nothing looked right. And there's areas of the Bahamas near the Great Bahama Bank that look like the Florida Keys. And everybody searched. Everybody's assumed they were off northern Florida, further out into the Atlantic Ocean. And that when they went over, they actually flew almost over Bimini, and then they were supposed to turn north. And I believe they turned south. That's the place where they got confused. And I believe they went south, and they wound up over the Great Bahama Bank, and they were where the pilot reported them to. And that guy's name was Taylor. He said that he thought they were somewhere near the Gulf of Mexico. And nobody searched this area for them. And we've seen from the air now, we do aerial surveys first. We fly over these areas at a very low altitude, roughly 500 feet. When we see something in the water, because the water's very shallow there, we get the GPS on the plane, and we film and photograph. We got 120 spots the last time we did this. And then we go back, we take our boat over, and we go to the GPS and look at these spots. It's a very difficult thing to do because it's shallow water. It's a long distance. There's nowhere to stay. Phones don't work there, and it's really very remote. In some ways, it's almost stupid to do, but it's just so interesting. We just can't help it anymore. It's something we really like doing. So we're exploring areas where no one really has explored before because it's just too darn difficult. And it's surprising.
Some people who have been able to get into the triangle and out again have seen a green fog.
Yes.
What do you think that could be?
Well, I don't know. I have talked to people that have seen the fog, green fog. Some have seen a luminescent fog. We have filmed luminescent water before from the air. That's shown on a lot of documentaries, and that's a well-known phenomenon. It's not clearly understood what causes it. The fog, the people we work with there have gone into the fog numerous times. They don't like doing it because you really can't see anything. I honestly don't. I don't know what it is.
Could it be bubbling methane?
I don't think so, because if you went into that, you would know it. You'd smell it. You would know that it's
rotten eggs or something.
Yes, and I'm a pilot. In addition to all the rest of this stuff, I am a licensed pilot, and I know that a lot of these disappearances are because of, they call it pilot error, but it's just plain stupidity, taking and doing things too quick, trying to fly around storms that you have no business trying to fly around, trying to beat a storm leaving with poor maintenance. The maintenance in the Bahamas is very bad on planes. They don't have an FAA. They don't have the same regulations we do as long as you're just staying within the Bahamas.
And what's so fascinating, though, about this, Greg, is these planes and these ships tend to disappear almost instantly.
Well, that's true, and there's no, some of the radio reports. One that we found, we believe, is a DC-3 passenger craft, was 50 miles. We found a DC-3 50 miles off of Miami.
One went down December 28th, 1948.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that.
I wonder
that may wind up on the National Geographic show that we did. There's actually two DC-3s. One of them is somewhat later.
29 passengers, 3 crew.
That's correct. And it had a bad battery. When we found the DC-3 50 miles from Miami, the odd thing was the batteries of the plane were right there.
Yeah.
Which was weird. We found the batteries of all things, and we have pulled up literally hundreds of parts from these planes to ID them. And I got to admit, the National Geographic was good. When we pull a part up, they were on the phone, cell phones, and they would call these things in. We wound up taking the parts back to Bimini, and then we'd try and clean them off. And they were on the phone constantly to experts getting information as we were sitting there doing this, because they wanted to ID the plane while they were shooting the film. As it turned out, they couldn't ID it while we were there, but we believe they ID'd it afterward by sending some parts to a manufacturer. But it was a DC-3. But in any event, these planes do just kind of suddenly disappear. There's no radio message. As a pilots are trained to call in maydays, and 50 miles is not far in the air. Florida, all of the airports in Florida can hear the planes in the Bahamas, and there is a specific frequency you use, and you don't ever hear maydays. Nobody calls a mayday in. The plane is simply flying from say Andros to Florida, and about halfway over they get a message from the guy saying, the pilot, and he says, he expects to land in a certain amount of time, and he's never heard from again. They don't hear a mayday or anything, and that just doesn't make any sense.
No. Tell me about your work and fascination with the Native American mounds.
That actually started, it came out of nowhere in 1982. Right after I completed the first book that I did, which was called The Archetype Experience. It's been long out of print. And it was a UFO book, a follow-up to Carl Jung's last book called Flying Saucers. But I did this follow-up book to Jung, and when it was done, and in those days, you used typewriters, and you mailed the manuscript off, and you waited for a publisher to tell you yes or no. And I remember that really well. And then all of a sudden, I started having these dreams about standing on Indian mounds. And night after night, I talked to a lot of people about it, night after night after night, and I knew nothing about mounds. I don't think I'd ever seen one before then. I'd never seen a TV show on mounds, just was absolutely clueless. And then my wife and I had an experience, and it was with a spider. And I woke up one morning after having another dream with the mounds, and I said, okay, I know what I need to do. Because I would be standing on these mounds and photographing them. And I said, I need to document Indian mounds. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. So the first mound site we then visited, we decided we got to go to a mound site. So I found the closest one. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. There's a site in Memphis run by the University of Memphis. We went there, and there was a rotating display at the time in the museum. And right when we walked in the door, there was the spider that we had seen on that rotating display. And that was my first experience with Indian mounds. And then it became an absolute obsession. And I started visiting Indian mounds, and by the time 1994 rolled around, at the end of the third book that I had done in UFOs, I had over 3,000 pictures of Indian mounds and had visited, I don't really know how many sites, but I had 3,000 different mound pictures. So it became an obsession to try and write an encyclopedia of mounds. But then I realized this is a big project because there are literally probably 100,000 mounds still in existence today, and that would be a lot of work. And I didn't know at the time that Edgar Cayce had 68 readings on mounds, and then in 2002, I decided to be the spearhead of this book on mounds and what Edgar Cayce said about them, because so many things had happened in 1997, which kind of turned American archaeology around. Everything changed in 1997, and it continues to change. So we did that, the mound book, based on Cayce's readings. And then about a year and a half ago, it just came to me, I've got to finish this mound encyclopedia. So I spent essentially a year compiling an encyclopedia, and a pictorial encyclopedia. We used a top archaeological reconstruction artist determined to create 75 site reconstructions of major sites so people could see what they really looked like when they were being used. And I realized, too, that I could only put the sites in this that people could actually visit, and those that were still intact and those that were possible to go to. A lot of these are on the National Historic Register, and they don't want people to know where they are. But so I finished this book. It's a hardback. It's oversized, of course, and it has about 600 photos and illustrations in it, maps and so on. That took a year. In fact, it was an amazing project. It just took so much time. But then all of a sudden, when we finished it, it's like this massive burden just lifted off of my shoulder. And the book's actually done very well and had a lot of positive things said about it. We did a mound tour last week with the ARE, and we went to numerous sites in Ohio and discovered this fits in directly with all this. There is a site at Portsmouth, Ohio. Portsmouth is on the Ohio River, and in 500 B.C., 2,500 years ago, there were over 20 miles of earthworks and various mounds and formations that extended from the Portsmouth, Ohio side to the Kentucky side of the river there. On the Kentucky side, well, on the Portsmouth side, on the top of a hill, is a circular arrangement with horseshoes in it. By the way, Stonehenge is a circle with a horseshoe in the center. The Portsmouth circle and horseshoes were arranged the same way. The earthen horseshoe is still there. A fellow who I know you've had on your show at least once, by the name of Brent Raines, conducted a kind of a ceremony, and we did a smudging ceremony. His wife is a Cherokee, and the odd thing was this: there's 20, I believe there were 25 of us in this horseshoe. It's a large horseshoe shaped enclosure. The walls are 9 feet high, and it was like you couldn't hear anything in there. It was dead, and Brent Raines actually recorded this on a tape recorder, and the only person you can hear in this tape recorder is him, because the tape recorder was right by him. You can't hear other people talking, and when he turns in any other direction other than speaking directly into it, it's just dead. But we couldn't hear anything in there. It was the oddest sensation. It was like there was a hum inside this thing.
The one at Cahokia Mounds near St. Louis, right across the river, the Mississippi, is also so incredible. I've been there a couple times.
The Cahokia Monk's Mound is actually larger than, its base is an acre larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah, it's huge. And the population at the time, they estimated, was huge in that area.
Up to 50,000 people living at Cahokia, 120 mounds. Cahokia Monk's Mound is the height of a 10-story building even today. And interestingly, there's a mystery at the base of Monk's Mound. In the late 1990s, Southern Illinois University at Carbondale did a ground-penetrating radar study there after another company that was trying to install drainage pipe hit granite at the base of this mound. And the ground-penetrating radar turned up there are 3 large stone chambers of stone which came from some distance away, since there's no stone there, at the base of this mound. And chances are that that'll never be gone into in our lifetime. But these are huge chambers, the size of a building down there, 3 of them, one on top of each other. And they have no idea what they are, although they're probably, most archaeologists would say, well, it's got to be a burial of somebody really important. But it doesn't make sense that there's 3 chambers there.
Fascinating work there.
Yes. I didn't finish Portsmouth. On the other side of the river from Portsmouth, In 500 B.C., there was a replica of Plato's Atlantis, a mini replica of Plato's Atlantis built. A huge 1,500-foot in diameter circular arrangement around a central mound. It had 3 rings of earth and moats in between and 4 walkways oriented to the cardinal directions. And there was a 7-mile walkway leading from there to the other side of the Ohio River up to the horseshoe. Now, we were told before that this Atlantis enclosure was obliterated. And that's actually what I didn't put in the Mound Encyclopedia that was totally gone. I said it was essentially obliterated. I don't really want to mention the name, but a politician got involved in this, and this politician arranged for us to meet the owner of this land. It was very nice and took us out, and the Atlantis style enclosure still exists. It's not in pristine condition, and a lot of it was leveled for farming purposes, but it's still there, and it's incredible. There's actually a book written about it many, many years ago that says it was Atlantis, although it couldn't have been Atlantis. But Edgar Cayce said that many mounds were built as replicas of the Atlantis experience.
And that could be.
Yes.
That could very well be. And the work that they did all around this area has just been incredible.
There are far more people, almost everybody listening to this, in all 50 states. There are mounds in every single state. Some of them were relatively small, so I didn't include them. They're almost tiny little burial mounds. Probably 100,000 still existing. Some of these are incredible. The most extensive geometric earthworks, complex and geometric earthworks existing anywhere in the earth today are in Newark, Ohio. There's a circle and octagon that perfectly predicts eclipses using the 18.61 year cycle of the moon. We actually talked to Ohio's head archaeologist, Bradley Lepper, who talked about that to us, and we had a Ohio University professor there at the site who explained it too. And this stuff's incredible, but people don't know it's there. There's a circle and an octagon there. It's just incredible.
We'll be back in a moment. We'll take phone calls with you next, Greg, on Coast to Coast AM.
Find out more about tonight's guest. Log on to coasttocoastam.com.
Confessions of a Potentially Perfect Parent, brought to you by AdoptUsKids.org.
I might look like an adult, like a person who could possibly be a parent, but I have no idea how to talk like one. And everyone knows that if you want to be a parent, you have to sound good when you say things like, "Don't make me turn this car around," or "because I said so," or "Don't make me come back there." I don't even really know what those things mean, but I know that I actually believed my parents when they said them to me. How did they manage to sound so convincing? Here we go. "Don't make me come back there." Oh, no, that's not tough enough at all. Kids can sense weakness. "Don't make me come back there." Ooh, yeah, that's better. In fact, that kind of sounded like my dad. Weird.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to listen to you practice your dad voice. Call 1-888-200-4005 or visit AdoptUsKids.org for more information. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
Dear Mom and Dad, one thing I've learned in the Army is that when you're lucky enough to get a little time off, you should put it to good use. So I'm taking a moment to write and tell you that I'm fine and doing well. We have good days and bad days over here. We try to remember the good ones and get...
To talk with George Noory, call the Wildcard line at area code 818-501-4109. The first-time caller line is area code 818-501-4721. To talk to George toll-free from east of the Rockies, call 1-800-825-5033. West of the Rockies, toll-free at 1-800-618-8255. International callers may reach George Noory by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From the City of Angels, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Okay, this is the hour. Your phone calls now with Greg Little as we talk about mounds, Edgar Cayce, Atlantis, and also the pyramids and his work in Egypt. All that next on Coast to Coast AM.
This hour of Coast to Coast AM is brought to you by DarkMatterDVDs.com. Get your free DVD now at DarkMatterDVDs.com.
Hey, investors, does the government bailout plan sound more like a hedge fund? Borrow money to invest? Should you invest in this kind of strategy? Let's ask Kevin Demerit of Lear Capital.
George, the question isn't whether we should or shouldn't invest. We already are. The kicker is that the government is borrowing money from the same people it's trying to bail out, us. If the bailout fails, we have to pay it back. If it works, we pay it back.
Can this work?
Well, I think the government bailout is like finding spare change in your couch when there's no money in the bank. It feels good for the moment, but you only have so many couch cushions. So what happens when we get higher inflation, higher taxes, more market volatility because of this bailout?
So what choices do investors have?
Well, I think all of this is creating an incredible opportunity for gold. Gold can give investors a hedge against inflation and higher interest rate if the bailout works, and if it doesn't work, gold is still going to be there to protect and grow your savings and retirement accounts. Gold is easy to buy, easy to sell, and it has never been worth zero. Compare that to the alternatives.
Folks, to learn more, call Lear Capital, the exclusive gold company of Coast to Coast AM, at 1-800-474-4259 for that free gold investor kit. You'll also get Lear's latest special report, Gold in the Markets Ahead. Call now, 1-800-474-4259. That's 1-800-474-4259. 1-800-474-4259.
We don't get many second chances. This one could save your life. A TIA or transient ischemic stroke is a mini stroke. Symptoms usually go away within 24 hours and you feel fine again. But if you don't get to a stroke center or hospital fast, you risk a full-fledged stroke that can change your life forever. Don't take that chance. Contact National Stroke Association at 1-800-STROKES or visit stroke.org and find out more about recognizing stroke symptoms fast. Do it now while there's still time.
1110 KFAB. On air, online, on demand.
Greg, you've got an article on your website talking about a Bigfoot encounter in the Bahamas.
Oh, my, yes.
Why don't you elaborate on that?
Well, Brent Raines wrote an article about that. Actually, it's a repeat of an article about a Bigfoot and some other creatures seen in the Bahamas and some other places. And in one of our trips to Andros Island, I wound up interviewing one of these guys who was a descendant of the Seminoles near Red Bay. In fact, he was the one who led us out to take a look at one of the DC-3s that we found in a very remote area that had crashed. In any event, on the way there, he told us about a story of about a stream bed that we went by, and he had tracked a Bigfoot in this area. He could hear it, and he looked at the tracks jumping from one side of this stream to the other and followed them. And he could hear the thing screaming. I don't remember the noise that he described. But then, after that, we talked to several other people who told us some similar stories. Plus, there's the stories of what's called a chickcharney, which is a creature specifically on Andros. I interviewed two older women, both of whom were fundamentalist Christians, who claimed they just swore that they had seen a chickcharney, although they were scared to talk about it. And it is a creature that looks sort of like a dwarf. It has a human's head and a bird's body, and its feet are turned backwards. There's several mythologies about it. Now, anthropologists believe that it is based on a type of owl. In any event, my wife and I got back to the U.S., and we went to the University of Florida's library in Gainesville because we were actually looking up some other articles in some obscure journals. And we were trying to figure out about this stone wall we had found. So we looked through all these newspapers and the Bahamian Journal of Science. Every single issue of it I went through. And then all of a sudden I stumbled upon all these Bigfoot sightings in the Bahamas in the 1970s, exactly when this guy said this thing had taken place. One after another, a rash of sightings, not only in Andros, but in Abaco and several other islands, really small islands there. And it just struck me as very, very odd. And these people that I talked to, I mean, they were serious. There was no reason for them to pull my leg or lie, and I haven't. I mean, I mentioned it in this article is all. I was commenting on someone else saying that had been reports there. But that's pretty odd. And these things just keep happening. The thing that I guess I need to add, oh boy, while we were there, the Chickcharney has a nest that is, in the mythology, the nest is two pine trees pushed together, the top is connected, and they build their nest in the top of it. So here we are going through this very remote pine forest, and just out of nowhere, I'm the first person that spotted it, I saw way up in the woods two trees pushed together at the top, big pine trees. And so we all walked up there, and there was a huge nest, about as big as a person, at the top of these two pine trees that were stuck together at the top. A Chickcharney nest. I mean, everybody, we told the Bahamians with us said, yeah, that's a Chickcharney nest. I said, did you know it was there? And they said, no, they'd never even been in this area because we were trying to get to this crashed DC-3 that we had to walk about 5 miles with. In fact, my father was with us on that trip.
Okay, that's the one you were talking about, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so odd seeing this thing. I've never seen a nest like that before. It was huge. It was at the top of these trees, and the two trees were like pushed together at the top and somehow connected. You couldn't see how they were connected, but the nest was between them both, and it looked like it had been sort of incorporated into the tops of the trees. Just strange. A lot of strange things like that.
Okay, let's go to some of the phone calls. Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's the home of ARE, right?
Yeah, that sounds like ARE.
Eric, first-time caller. Go ahead, Eric.
Yes, sir. I live on 24th Street. I believe it's on 66th or 60th Street.
60th.
And I've never been there. And there's a spa. They say it's a great place.
Well, you need to go. They have great massages there. They got a great. They got the Riley School of Massage. It's a very famous school.
My question for you, sir, would be: did he prophesy Jesus? Did he actually see Jesus, or did he prophesy a God as well? Not a God. I'm not. A little nervous.
Okay, that's okay. I don't know if he talked about Jesus or any other.
Well, he did talk. He did talk about Jesus. Cayce was a fundamentalist. He was a fundamentalist Christian.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and he did talk about Jesus. He didn't prophesy about Jesus. I mean, he didn't make any prophecies about Jesus. He said Jesus was a real historical person. Jesus was who he said he was. But the story is bigger. It's like the story Jesus tells us, or that we hear, the main story, is not the entire story. There's more to it. The way I look at it, it's like the story that most people know about Jesus is about all they need to know. But Edgar Cayce said a little more about it. And that's getting pretty deep, and there's actually specialists in the ARE that deal with that. But he was a fundamentalist Christian, and his beliefs remained fundamentalist pretty much to the very end.
All right, next up, let us go to Olympia, Washington, west of the Rockies. CJ, welcome to the show. Hi, CJ.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
In response to the last caller, I think the Bible is full of paranormal events. Jesus walking on water, rising from the dead, stuff like that. It's basically a paranormal book. But anyways, my question for you was earlier you were talking about ancient technology and consciousness and matter being one. You were talking about that earlier as part of the technology that Edgar Cayce was talking about. Now, if you go back to, this has to do with UFOs, but if you go back to the Roswell crash, and out of all the witnesses that have come forward, and remember, 0 witnesses have said that it was a weather balloon. All of them have described it as being seamless, no parts, no moving parts, as if the beings inside were combined were using their mind to control the craft. Now, can you go back to what you were talking about earlier about Edgar Cayce, or what you were saying earlier about the technology that was consciousness and matter working together? Because if you look at UFOs, it appears that most of them appear to be alive as if they're controlled by the mind.
Of course, Cayce didn't talk about Roswell. He died in 1945. But what I will say is this. Cayce did talk about the interchangeability between energy and matter. He said the closest thing that we could understand God as is electricity. He said that God's not an electron. He's not really electricity, but that's as close as we could possibly understand. There does appear to be what I'll call a plasticity that can occur between energy and matter, matter being hard, energy being not physical at all in the sense that we think of. So between it, you have plasticity, and it can mold and evolve itself and shape itself in any way. But according to Cayce, energy has an intelligence, and that UFOs that appear to have an intelligence and are genuine probably would be a manifestation of that energy then, according to Cayce. But he didn't talk about UFOs per se.
Okay, very good. Thanks for the call. Let's go next to Port Huron, Michigan, east of the Rockies. Hey, Dan, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, gentlemen.
Hey.
I was listening earlier about the Bermuda Triangle, and I had caught a program, and I was just wondering your take on this. Everybody has a theory or opinion of the events in the Bermuda Triangle. This program had suggested that it was Earth's black hole. And being a big fanatic of space, I found this fascinating because, you know, the gravitational pull and the magnetic fields around black holes are just, you know, such a mystery. And then the contrast of white holes, instead of eating and destroying matter and swallowing even light, a white hole spews out stuff into the universe. Well, this program had stated if you drove a rod through the Bermuda Triangle, it would come out the other side of the globe on what is known as the Dragon's Triangle, I believe, which is off the coast of Japan somewhere.
Yeah.
How would this work, being that it's on the ocean floor? Could maybe the oceanic vents have anything to do with that, or just what's your take on that theory?
Okay, I am very familiar with the theory. If it's a black hole, the only thing I'll ask is, I mean, there is a real mystery in the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, there truly are some mysterious phenomena that are not understood, lots of theories, like you said. But this particular theory, how come the water doesn't go into it? If it's a black hole, how come it's just an occasional ship or a plane? And why doesn't water go down in there too? Why isn't it all sucked in?
Like a whirlpool or something.
I understand. I understand the theory. I just it's clear that a lot of these planes are there. They haven't disappeared. They haven't gone into a black hole. We are finding the planes. I believe Flight 19...
The question is why are they there?
Yes. The question is why are these things disappearing? Why are they going into nothing or crashing, and there's no maydays, they're just gone? What is happening? I don't think it's a black hole, though. I do know the theory. I know the people that put it forth. I just don't see that as a good explanation.
I don't see it as a UFO thing either, do you?
Yeah, no. Well, there are some,
there's some reports, I agree.
There are lights associated with some of this. But beyond that, yeah.
But not just in that region. There's something going on, whether it is caused by an ancient civilization like the Atlanteans that created a crystal. There's something that's disruptive to guidance, communications. I love the theory about the waters creating this underwater bubble that sucks down a boat or a ship instantly because it can't float.
That's right. They lose buoyancy. When the bubbles come up, it loses buoyancy. And I think that's a good theory, too, and I think it does explain some. That would certainly explain why a plane, you're flying there, and the next thing you know, you're in the water.
Yep.
Just like that. And a ship would just go straight down, too.
Let's go to Tampa Bay, Florida. Hello, John. Welcome to Coast. You're on the air with us. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, George, for taking my call.
Sure thing.
Greg, it's great to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
In 2006, Bill Donato and you were on your way to the Bermuda Triangle or to Bimini, and you stopped off in Tampa Bay to look at some giant stone anchors that were 4 feet to 10 feet above sea level. And you didn't see the giant stone anchors, but Bill Donato did. And what I'm wondering is what your take is on the fact that these are 10 to 15 times the size of the stone anchors you've been finding in Bimini, and that they're up 150 feet above the level of the rocks that you're finding. How does that interconnect with Atlantis?
Well, I know what Bill's take was, and I've read the articles on it. I've probably read some of yours too, and I'm familiar with them, seen your photos. I don't really know what to make of them. I think that some of them probably were utilized as anchors that's been theorized, long chains or whatever, and probably, the sea levels were once higher too. I do not agree with the idea that Tampa was Atlantis, although chances are that during the last ice age, if Atlantis was in the Bahamas, as we believe, Florida would have also been a part of it. And the interesting thing is Florida has a lot of ancient canals there. We haven't even gotten a chance to talk about any of that at mound sites. They were building canals, and that fits Atlantis. But I don't really have a take beyond the fact that these are anchors. They are very different from what we found at Bimini. The ones we found there are smaller, and the ones we found at Bimini are pretty much identical to Phoenician anchors. What you found there are pretty darn unique. They are gigantic stones with telephone pole size holes drilled through them. But I don't have a take beyond that. They're truly enigmatic as far as I know.
All right, thanks.
Okay, you got it. What do you do next? What are your plans, Greg?
Well, we go back to Bimini in a week.
You're going to do it, huh?
We are going to try and film every one of those 35 formations. We are going back actually to finish off these hundreds and some spots that we have left to look at on the Great Bahama Bank. And one more oddity here, back in the 70s, you're probably familiar with this, but there was a story of a guy by the name of Ray Brown who found a crystal in a pyramid off the Berry Islands. It was supposedly in deep water, and he dove down and got a large crystal that was in some sort of a holder, like two hands in the apex of an underwater pyramid. Now, I have investigated that story, and I've always thought the story was nonsense. I'm actually more of a skeptic than a believer, and I know you know that because we've talked many times. But in any event, here's what happened. Our contacts in the Bahamas, which trust us a lot, they have found off the Berry Islands, and I've had them searching for us for a while there. They have found what looks like a pyramid, large stone blocks arranged on the bottom in multiple levels, almost a multi-tiered pyramid. I don't think we'll find the crystal there. Ray Brown took it. But we're going to go and investigate that also. I've got to go see what this thing is. And I believe him. There's something there. I just don't know what it is. But it sounds a lot like Ray Brown's pyramid. I almost hate to say that.
All right, let's take another call. Let's go to Denver, Colorado. Marshall, it's your turn on Coast to Coast. Hi, Marshall.
Hello, George, and thank you, gentlemen, for having such an engaging conversation this evening.
Thanks.
I had a question. First of all, you were talking about the Bimini Road. How do you, if I were to look that up online, what exactly would I look for? How do you...
Bimini, just go to Google, put in quotation marks, Bimini, B-I-M-I-N-I, and then a space and R-O-A-D. Close your quotes, and then you'll get a lot.
Okay,
see
great.
Everything from what skeptics say to what we say.
Okay, and I have been seeing quite a bit on the age of Aquarius, which is allegedly coming into play in 2012, so to speak, with all the talk and whatnot with the Mayan calendar and all of that. Is there any sort of relation, Greg, that do you see in any theory between ancient civilizations coming from, like, the star system of Sirius?
The only thing that I'll say is that Edgar Cayce never mentioned 2012. There is a lot written about 2012. The Mayans did, and not the Aztecs, but the Mayans did talk about 2012. We have been at the site at Piedras Negras, Guatemala, where it's the only site that has both the creation date, 3114 BC, and 2012 on the same rock stela. We filmed that there. But no, I can't tell you that I can answer that personally. I can tell you, too, that Edgar Cayce did say there was an extraterrestrial visitation into the Maya lands. And I think I told George before that actually made me nervous when I read it, because I don't like contemplating that. I am sort of a skeptic. But Cayce
Absolutely.
Cayce said there was some sort of an extraterrestrial visit in the Maya lands. And it's just kind of weird. I don't know what to make out of it. But there's only 3 readings in Cayce's that look extraterrestrial. One is that, and the other 2 are about the Atlanteans getting messages from non-earthly influences, intelligences, the same way that I believe that a lot of the crop circles are being made. People are getting messages, and they are almost like robots then carrying out instructions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had seen there was a crop circle next to Stonehenge, I think in the mid-'90s, that had a spiral effect, which was allegedly from certain sources, like a map or a blueprint for like zero-point propulsion and different forms of traveling.
Well, there's no doubt that there's messages in the crop circles. The question is, where are they coming from? Where are the messages coming from? The ARE put out their first book on crop circles. They have a new publishing house called Fourth Dimension Press, and that British guy, Andrew Collins, put out the first book on it. It's called The New Circle Makers. And in it, Andrew tells the story of walking into his first crop circle in 1977. But he believes there's some sort of intelligence involved in the making of crop circles.
Fred, we're going to come right back and wrap things up with final phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM.
Sign up now for Streamlink. Now with podcasting. Get it today at coasttocoastam.com.
KFAB.
We're out to be number 1 in the USA. That's the reason people say, Rusty Export, hey, you can't do better than that.
Will somebody please call the law? There's a lot of people fixing to steal a lot of vehicles at Rusty Export with our giant rebates, giant discounts, and cash for clunkers. This has got to be illegal. Illegal, I tell you. Not.
The selection of lowest prices, too. That's the reason people choose Rusty Export, yeah. You can't do better than that.
Brand new 2010 Fusion starting at only $9,800. Brand new $27,000 Ford Taurus is starting at only $11,900. Brand new $17,000 Ford Focus is starting at only $5,500. Call the law.
Rusty Export, yeah, you can't do better than that.
This is exciting.
Absolutely incredible.
If you don't come see me today, I can't save you any money.
Prices after all discounts, rebates, and government rebates must finish with FMCC on approval credit.
Join Menards this week in saluting our American-made products with Menards Made in the USA sale. Build your dream deck with Ultra Deck.
Bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Someday you wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you did to, oh, why
George Noory. Call the Wildcard line at 818-501-4109. The first-time caller line is 818-501-4721. To talk to George toll-free from east of the Rockies, call 1-800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies toll-free, call 1-800-618-8255. International callers may reach George Noory by calling their in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 1-800-893-0903. From the City of Angels, this is Coast to Coast AM with George Noory.
Brother is, as they call him, loved in Hawaii and all over the place. He's not with us anymore. Our next guest on Coast to Coast will be Linda Godfrey. We talk about the beast of Bray Road as we trail Wisconsin's werewolf. So get ready for that program. When we come back, final phone calls with our guest, Greg Little, on Coast to Coast AM. When you think of great innovations, your bed doesn't typically come to mind, does it? Well, I do with mine, the Sleep Number bed by Select Comfort. It's the perfect bed for couples. Each of you will have your own Sleep Number. It's like having two beds in one. A great bed is also great value, with queen mattresses starting at just $6.99. It's the only bed clinically proven to relieve back pain and improve sleep quality. In fact, research shows that 77% of participants reported increased energy. For a limited time, Select Comfort is featuring the last chance closeout sale of all special edition bed sets. You can save up to $800 while the supplies last. Call 1-800-390-9100 to get more information, including a free DVD and brochure with complete details on models, sizes, and options. Call 1-800-390-9100 today. Plus, you'll receive a $50 thank you gift card with any purchase over $100. Restrictions apply. 1-800-390-9100.
Next time you're on the road and want the best value for an overnight stay, call 1-800-251-1962 or visit bookroomsnow.com. You can reserve a room at Passport Inn or Scottish Inns where you get a great value, a comfortable room in convenient places, and a good night's sleep too. Times are tough and the economy's uncertain. Can you afford not to consider the best value for your next overnight stay? Passport Inn and Scottish Inns are located across the country, so call 1-800-251-1962 or go to bookroomsnow.com. That's bookroomsnow.com.
This is Robert Steinberg. I'm a lawyer, and I'm going to talk to you about mesothelioma and asbestos-related lung cancer. My Uncle Lou died from mesothelioma after working in shipyards. That makes this fight personal to me, and I will personally fight for you. So call me, Robert Steinberg, toll-free at 888-891-2200. That's 888-891-2200. On the web at robertlsteinberg.com. That's robertlsteinberg.com. Call 888-891-2200. The consultation is free and personally with me.
Robert Steinberg is licensed by the Supreme Court of Texas in New York. Case is likely to be referred. Principal office, Houston, Texas.
Your home for Fox News, 1110 KFAB.
What's going on around Puerto Rico, Greg? Anything special there beyond the chupacabras?
I don't know of anything going on there besides that. I used to spend a lot of time there, but I haven't in some time.
So it's quiet on the front.
Yes. By the way, we didn't get to mention this. There will be some news coming out of Egypt. The ARE is continuing to do work at Egypt. The ARE supplied a drill that was used to put 3 holes into the rock around the Sphinx. A camera was dropped in. This occurred just a couple of months ago. They hit water, and there is an opening down there. There is something beneath the surface, a chamber or whatever. Zahi allowed the ARE to ship a drill over, and the ARE is going to continue to do more work with them. It's actually now a formalized arrangement.
Is Zahi a little more open, or is he still keeping these cards to his
I don't think he's any more open.
No.
But the ARE has been involved in things quietly there for a long time, and it's not what I would call quiet now, but it's Zahi has to walk kind of a tightrope between a number of different things. But the truth is, I don't really know how much longer he'll be there, and there'll be somebody else at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. We've
probably sooner than later.
We may broadcast out there sometime next year.
Yeah, very good.
Right by the base of the the pyramids, but who knows? Maybe they'll uncover the Hall of Records while we're there.
Maybe there is a plan to do the area that Andrew Collins went to do the caves, and I suspect National Geographic or History Channel or somebody will be there when that's done.
Of everything that you've investigated, Greg, in your career, what has fascinated you the most?
The truth is, the thing that's fascinated me the most is really mounds. That may sound odd, but it's that they are so complex, and there's so many of them, and they have geomagnetic anomalies around them. There's so many weird experiences people report associated with mounds. Mounds are also, all these things connect together. They're very ancient, a lot old. The American mounds are older than Egyptian pyramids. The oldest mounds now are in Louisiana. They date to 3800 B.C., 5,800 years ago. And where these people came from is a complete mystery. So that's probably the most amazing thing. The most amazing things right now, which need to be finished, are these rectangular formations off of Bimini, because they do look like remnants of Atlantis. And I don't say that. I've been very, very cautious with all the statements we've ever made about this search for Atlantis. We've never gone overboard with anything. But these really do look like buildings, and we know they are on the 10,000 B.C. shoreline. And then you've got this thing in Egypt. There really are caves and tunnels under Giza. They've been entered. There's hundreds of photographs of them. The documentation will be out soon in a book. So there's a whole lot going on here, a tremendous amount going on. And I don't know what's going to break and be the really big news first. I know there'll be a lot of interest once all these documentaries start showing, though.
Okay, let's go now back to the phones. We'll go to Gainesville, Texas. Teague on the wild card line. Hi, Teague. Good morning.
It's actually Gainesville, Florida.
All right.
Hey, I was wondering, that area near where you were talking about, the Berry Islands.
Yes.
At the tail end of that, I think near a place we used to call the Fish Keys, possibly. There's a thing we used to call the Blue Hole. Have you been there?
No, I have not. No, tell me about it.
All right, it's in the middle of, some of those islands over there are tiny, so it's only maybe 40 acres, this little island. And in the middle of it is this lagoon called the Blue Hole. On the edges of this lagoon, now it goes like straight into the island, straight down, and it goes down deeper than we could scuba dive anyways.
Yeah, I know.
But then in the middle, there's a column coming up to maybe within 30 feet of the surface. It seems, I don't know, it seems very unnatural. I was wondering if you're going to be in the area.
No, I'm not familiar with it. What's the name of it again? The island?
We used to call it the Blue Hole, and it was the tail end, the east side of the Berry Islands as you go around from Chubb past Whale Key, and I think we used to call them the Fish Keys, maybe?
I got you. Okay. We'll check
anyways,
it out.
if you're in the area, you should check it out.
I thank you for that, Will. I like all these. I like getting little hints like that. Leads. That's good. We'll check it out.
You don't have a huge research department, though. You're doing it all by yourself and with your
My wife
lawyer.
and I do this by ourselves. We employ some Bahamians with us. We occasionally take some other people with us. We do not accept funding from the ARE. All these other things I've discussed are ARE funding, but we don't do that. We try and stay independent, although the skeptics keep saying that we get funded from the ARE, and they've stopped saying it. I've had to force them to stop saying that because we don't. We haven't taken anything from the ARE.
Ever have a harrowing experience on one of your travels?
We have had several. The scariest one was going into that Autech thing.
Yeah.
That was stupid because it was bad weather. The other one is when we tried to go over and meet National Geographic, our boat. My wife and I got a boat specifically for these things. Well, an 8-foot wave came up over, and I'm running the boat, being the captain, and I'm sitting down, and in less than a second, it's like a quarter of a second, you go from being totally dry and having the whole inside of the boat dry to it being just totally filled with water. I mean, instantly, totally filled, swamped. So we turn, and this boat is made, it's a catamaran, and it's supposed to be unsinkable. And that was very scary. We turned around. We were prepared for an emergency, but not something like that. But we had a special portable bilge pump, and it had bilges. It cleaned it out, and we did fine. But we then flew over for that one.
Let's go to Springfield, Illinois. Andrea, east of the Rockies. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Go ahead, hon.
Oh, okay. I just wondered if the state of Virginia was part of Atlantis.
always felt that way.
Well, Edgar Cayce said it was a special place, and Edgar Cayce also said that Atlanteans fled, that Atlantean survivors fled there, and their descendants stayed there. But as far as it being part of Plato's Atlantis, most people would say no. But it was some of the lands in existence when the Atlanteans fled, and that's what Cayce said.
What makes you think it was part of Atlantis, Andrea?
Just a feeling, past lives, just a feeling.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with just a feeling.
Not at all.
That's how things happen quite a bit. Bellingham, Washington, west of the Rockies. Stephen, it's your turn. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Good,
George?
we're well, thanks.
I have two questions covering two of the different subjects. And by the way, Dr. Greg, I appreciate that you're skeptical. You're a scientist. So you're supposed to be, right?
Well, I try to be. I try to. You know, the word skeptic has taken on a different meaning. It means a disbeliever of anything now. I mean, skeptics are true disbelievers. They don't believe evidence that goes against their beliefs. I go where the evidence goes.
And regarding that, regarding the mound builders, this is my first question. There was controversy in the 19th century over, there was disagreement by...
Who built them?
Yeah, people couldn't agree, scientists couldn't agree on who built them.
Yes.
And they don't seem characteristic of anything that Native American tribes were doing. So what would it take to get a couple of them open today?
Well, first of all, loads of mounds have been opened in the past. When the NAGPRA law, Native American Grave Repatriation Act, passed, the Smithsonian supposedly had over 10 million skeletal remains, most of which were removed from mounds that they had to then have reburied. Lots of mounds have been opened. The one you're probably talking about is when I mentioned Cahokia, and it's very difficult to do that now, to go into any Native American grave, so there's not a lot of archaeology being done into the mounds. As to who built them, I'll readily say that they were built by the ancestors of the current Native Americans. The real question is, where did all those current Native Americans come from? They didn't all... Their descendants didn't, or their ancestors didn't all come from Beringia in 9500 B.C. like we've been told for the past 70 years. We know now there were people in the Americas for a long, long time, and there were various waves of migrations into the Americas from different places, from the South Pacific, clearly from Siberian Asia across Beringia in 9500 B.C., and maybe from certain European lands. But that's the question. Where did they come from? And where did they get the ideas from? Mounds and pyramids are everywhere in the world. The ones in America I find most interesting. And the ancients built with what they had there. In Egypt, they had two things. They had stone and they had sand. Well, you're not going to build a sand mound. That's called a sand dune, and it'll blow away. So they used stone. Our people here built mounds. They built earth. And where they had stone, they actually used it. You still see some stone mounds in Ohio, and there used to be some huge stone mounds in West Virginia, which were dismantled, and the settlers actually used them for buildings then. So that's the first question. What's the second?
The second one is regarding who would own these ruins in the ocean? Could any nation, is it possible that the United States would just jump in at some point and say, well, we claim this? Different countries may have interests. Would it go to the island nation closest to the find?
Well, are you talking about the remains we found at Bimini?
Yes.
That's owned by the Bahamas. And as soon as it's the interesting thing here, it's like a catch-22. And you'll see a lot of films and documentaries where I'm scuba diving and I'll move stones at the Bimini Road to get under them. And we've pulled wedge stones out and pulled up anchors. And the reason we're allowed to do that is because it's not a recognized archaeological site. The skeptics have written that it's all natural. Everything there is natural. Even the anchors, they're all natural. That some sort of boring worm caused them. And that every single thing there is natural. There's no human artifacts whatsoever. And you're allowed to move stones there. You're not allowed to disturb coral, and we don't do that. But you can move stones. That's not illegal. But as soon as it's recognized as an archaeological site, the Bahamas own it, the Bahamas will regulate it somehow. And I do hope that it is recognized as an archaeological site. And something may take place after this documentary comes out. I believe the one on Atlantis is in November, as I recall.
Have you done any work, Greg, about the possibilities that Atlanteans through Egypt may have come to North America? Hidden artifacts and things like that apparently have been found.
Yeah, there are several very, very curious things that appear to be Egyptian. Not just, some people would point to rock carvings that appear to be Egyptian petroglyphs. But there's a story of a temple site found near the Grand Canyon in a labyrinth of really a labyrinth of rooms, some of which are as large as a gymnasium would be, carved into a mountainside in the 1800s. Actually, I believe it was in 1899, I want to say. We have since found and matched it up with something that was found in 1997 called Cazamalpas, which is a site in New Mexico, and they've closed it off.
And what's that site look like, Greg?
Well, it's near the Grand Canyon, and it's a Hohokam site, but on a wall of a canyon, there is a tunnel that was discovered. And the tunnel is a little tube that goes in, and inside of that is a complex of hundreds of rooms carved into solid stone. They are square and rectangular rooms, some of which are as large as a gymnasium with 20-foot-high ceilings. That has been closed off and sealed, and that is the exact description of the room where hundreds of Egyptian artifacts were supposedly found by a Smithsonian expedition in 1899. And that was actually in an Arizona newspaper. And I don't believe it was a Smithsonian expedition. I believe the site was looted, and when they got caught, they claimed they were with the Smithsonian, and that's what the newspaper printed. And that's what we actually wrote in our Mound Builder book back in 2000. But yes, I believe there's been a lot of stuff found that looks Egyptian here, and definitely probably is Egyptian.
Okay, let's go next to Los Angeles. Gabriel, first-time caller. Hi, Gabriel.
Greg, how you guys doing?
Okay.
Hey, I got a story for you.
Sure.
So I'm down in the Yucatan, Quintana Roo area a couple years ago, and I'm with a friend who's from Europe, and I see him coming from a restricted area. I'm like, hey, what are you doing over there? He goes, I'm down checking out the Atlantis temple, mate. I'm like, nah, man, whatever. So that blows by. A couple years later, I go back with my nephew and my friends, and we're on the Ruta Maya. And to keep me occupied, I pick up a little book called Mayan Myths and Legends. The last story in that book talked about Atlantis falling, and that the queen sending out these 13 boats to different lands, and one land you're going to go to is, she kind of described the Yucatan because she said, you will build a pyramid in the story above a river, a caved river, which are the cenotes. So, anyways, I have friends that do security, and we go on this undercover tour to these ruins. And there they have this temple that they call the Atlantis Temple. And the doorway there, this is, off air I'll tell you exactly where, or I'll give you my email. But this is really cool, man, because when we get there, my friend Haji's like 6'4". He gets to the doorway, and they're still like a foot above his head. All the other temples of Mayans are smaller.
They're really small, yeah.
Real small. So the carvings on this temple are not even Mayan faces, man. They're different features. Now, in front of this temple is a 25-foot diameter stone, 25-foot diameter turtle. And you can see the head of the turtle, the back, and the stairs at the end of the stairs and the back are the tail and the legs. Then the guy tells us, he goes, right here, he goes, they dug up, he goes, they never realized it, but they just dug it up a month ago. If you guys would have been here, I would have showed you a picture. I mean, I would have showed you the body of a 7.5-foot giant.
Greg, how do we get your email out? We've only got about 30 seconds left.
Go to my website, mysterious-america.net, and look at some of the articles. You'll search around and find it, or send one to the editor of the site, and he'll get it to me.
The book, The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Native American Mounds and Earthworks, your latest work. Where do you get it?
Well, you can get it at Amazon. It was made for libraries. It's a hardback, cloth hardback, but it's available through Amazon.
Everything, all your work. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Best to your family, Greg.
Thank you so much, George. It's always a pleasure. You got a great show.
I'm telling you, you have brought us so many fascinating things. People can't go to sleep. Now they got to think about this.
Well, this is the fastest 3 hours.
It does fly by. Thank you so much, Greg. You take care of yourself. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Ross Mitchell, George Nappy, and Pundit and Art Bell, I'm George Noory. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.
Caitlin is a real student with big dreams.
I knew I needed help paying for college. My parents divorced when I was 3, and there's no way they could pay for it all. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a teacher. I used to put together worksheets, and I made my friends do them when they came over. After a while, nobody wanted to come over anymore. My guidance counselor was the one who told me about federal student aid, and my mom was a big help in filling out the free application. It was a challenge, but so worth it when I got the grants and loans that made school possible. What would I tell other kids? I would tell them not to give up, to look for options to go to school. Life is what you make it. My name is Caitlin. I'm going to be a special education teacher. I'm going to live my dreams.
Are you going to college? Federal Student Aid, an office of the U.S. Department of Education, has $100 billion available to help you pay for college. Find out more at college.gov.
You probably know where you'll get your next meal. Thousands in our community don't. You have a chance to help the hungry and have fun doing it. It's the Food Bank's Oh What a Duck Race, Saturday, July 25th at Heartland of America Park. You can adopt a duck for as little as $5 and have a chance to win a new car and even $1 million. Pick up your adoption papers at any Baker's, Panera Bread, Old Chicago.